Imagine living your life with calm in chaos, focus in pressure, and strength in moments that would break most people. Imagine facing problems not with panic, but with peace. Imagine being unshakable, not because life is easy, but because you are grounded. Now, tell me the truth. How often do you feel pulled in 1,000 directions? Stressed, distracted, reacting to everything, feeling like you're losing control of your own mind, your time, your energy. You're not alone. But here's the truth no one told you. There's a way to live better, stronger, calmer, wiser. And one man figured it out almost 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled an empire by day and ruled his own mind by night. He wrote not to impress others, but to control his thoughts, to stay humble, to stay focused, to stay free. And today, you're going to learn everything he discovered, not in fancy words, but in simple truths you can use right now to feel better, sleep deeper, and live with purpose. These aren't just quotes. This is a way of life, a map for the mind, a compass for the soul. And once you understand it, your life will never feel the same again. So before we begin, I want you to make a commitment to yourself, because once you master that, you master everything. Are you ready? Let's begin. You've stared at the ceiling at 2 a.m., haven't you? That quiet, hollow feeling that settles in your chest when everything slows down, except your thoughts. Worries stack on top of each other. One about tomorrow, another from last week, 100 about things that haven't even happened yet. Your heart beats faster than it should, and deep inside there's that unspoken fear. What if I can't handle it? But what if the problem isn't what's happening, but how close you're standing to it? What if you've been holding your life like a magnifying glass, where every little crack looks like the end of the world, when in truth, it's just a pebble on a planet that's spinning in infinite space? This is where the wisdom of the Stoics meets you, not with empty comfort, but with real, grounding clarity. They knew something that modern minds often forget. When you widen your view, your pain doesn't disappear, but it shrinks into something small enough to hold. Anxiety begins to lose its power when you see how vast the universe really is, and how small most of your fears truly are in comparison. Marcus Aurelius would often remind himself, "You are a soul carrying a corpse." He wasn't being dark. He was being clear. He knew that our fears, our anxieties, our need to control, these things only feel so heavy because we forget the scale of existence itself. Think about it. The Earth is one planet orbiting a single star, in one galaxy among billions. And we're a brief flicker in all that time and space. That can feel terrifying, or it can be freeing, because if we are small, our problems are smaller. That argument you replayed over and over in your mind, it's a whisper in the wind. That failure you carry like a stone in your chest. The universe doesn't even blink, not because you don't matter, but because the pressure to be perfect, to always be in control, it was never yours to carry. Stoics didn't use the cosmic perspective to escape responsibility. They used it to focus on what truly mattered. They saw that obsessing over every detail, every insult, every delay, every flaw, only tied them tighter to things they couldn't change. But when they lifted their eyes to the stars, when they remembered their place in the vast web of nature, their breathing slowed, their thoughts cleared, and they could act from peace, not panic. Modern anxiety often comes from shrinking your world too small, from thinking your inbox is the whole universe, from believing that a bad day means a bad life. But what if you stopped for a moment, took a breath, and looked up. That sky above you has existed for billions of years. The stars you see are ancient. The light hitting your eyes tonight may have started its journey long before you were even born. And yet, it found you. Right now, in this moment. You are here, alive, on a planet spinning in a universe that doesn't owe you clarity or comfort or certainty, but gave you existence anyway. The Stoics didn't believe in wasting that gift. They faced pain, grief, failure, but they didn't let those things swallow them. Why? Because they knew that every fear feels enormous when you hold it too close to your face. But when you step back, when you zoom out, you see what it really is. A drop of rain in a vast, calm ocean. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." He meant that everything shifts, everything dies, everything transforms. But your mind, your view, shapes how you feel about all of it. If you see life as a tightrope, you'll live afraid of every step. But if you see it as a wave, always moving, always shifting, you can learn to ride it, even enjoy it. This is the gift of cosmic perspective, the space between stimulus and response, the breathing room your soul has been craving. Because it's not that your fears aren't real, it's that they're not everything. They are not the whole picture. They are a passing cloud, not the sky. When you feel like things are spinning out of control, look beyond your bubble. See that you are not the only one feeling lost. Billions of lives are unfolding at this very moment, each filled with love, pain, dreams, regrets. You're part of that shared mystery, not separate from it. And the anxiety you feel? It's just one note in the great song of existence. You don't have to silence it, just hear it in the right context. You don't need to be fearless to live well. The Stoics weren't emotionless. They just learned how to hold their emotions instead of letting their emotions hold them. They saw that the fear of discomfort is often worse than discomfort itself, and the fear of uncertainty is often worse than the unknown. By focusing only on what they could control, their thoughts, their actions, their responses, they freed themselves from the chaos of everything else. Look at the stars again, not metaphorically, literally. Step outside or just picture them in your mind. Think of how long they've burned, how far their light has traveled, how nothing you fear has stopped them from shining. There's peace in that, not because it makes your life less important, but because it reminds you that you are part of something so much bigger. You're not fighting the universe. You are the universe, in human form, for a little while. When your thoughts start spinning, when your chest tightens and your breath feels short, ask yourself, will this matter in a year, in 10? And if not, let it go. If yes, then act on it with calm, not chaos, with presence, not panic. That's what Stoics practiced. That's what Marcus did in battle, in grief, in loss. He didn't run from life. He faced it, one clear breath at a time. Your mind doesn't need to be silent to rest. It just needs to be still enough to see the truth. That you're not trapped in your thoughts. You're the observer of them. The sky behind the clouds, the depth beneath the waves. Right now, in this moment, you can zoom out. Not in a forced way, not in some spiritual bypassing of pain, but as a clear, grounded practice of looking honestly at what you're holding and choosing to hold it gently. So when the fear creeps in late at night, when regrets crawl out from the corners of your memory, when uncertainty keeps you from sleep, remember the stars, not to make you feel small, but to show you the true size of your pain. It is not everything. You are more than what you fear, more than the version of yourself that stress has painted, more than the noise of your thoughts. There is stillness under it all. There is space, and you can return to it any time. That's what the Stoics did. That's why their wisdom still lives, because they learned how to see life from above, not to escape it, but to love it better, to accept it more fully, to move through it with less fear and more freedom. You were never meant to carry the weight of the world, only to carry your role in it with grace. And when that weight feels too heavy, lift your gaze. Let the vastness show you the truth. That most of what we worry about is dust, passing shadows. But your presence, your peace, your ability to return to stillness, that is eternal. That is the real power of cosmic perspective. And it's yours now. And so, as you begin to see your fears for what they really are, passing shadows in a much wider sky, you also realize something deeper. Fear doesn't always come from what's happening. Often it comes from what might happen. It comes from the what-ifs that show up right when the world goes quiet, when the lights go out and it's just you, your thoughts, and all the possible disasters your mind can create. This is where most people run. They try to distract themselves, scroll, binge, avoid. But the Stoics did the opposite. They leaned in. They sat with those fears, not to suffer, but to become free from suffering. Because when you face your fears with open eyes, something strange happens. They lose their power. The practice is called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It sounds dark, but it's not. It's clarity. It's strength. And when done with awareness, especially at night, it becomes a powerful tool to calm the nervous system and prepare the mind for deep, restful sleep. Instead of trying to avoid worst-case scenarios, you go there, deliberately. You rehearse them in your mind, not to scare yourself, but to train yourself, to remind your body that you could handle it, that you've already walked through the fire in your thoughts, so you no longer have to fear the heat. You lie down in bed, and instead of pushing the fears away, you welcome them in, one by one, gently. You think, what if I lose everything? What if the deal doesn't go through? What if they never call back? But instead of spiraling, you walk through the outcomes step by step, slowly, rationally. You ask, and then what? If I lose my job, then what? I'll be hurt. I'll feel fear, but I'll find another way. I've done hard things before. If they leave, then what? My heart will ache. I'll grieve. But I won't stop existing. If I fail, then what? I'll learn. I'll start again. This kind of thinking rewires your brain. Because fear isn't just about outcomes, it's about being unprepared. When your mind feels like it has no plan, no structure, it reacts with panic. But when you calmly walk through those fears, you train your nervous system to respond with strength instead of shock. It's like mental armor, not the kind that blocks emotion, but the kind that gives you courage to feel it fully and keep going. The Stoics didn't believe in fantasy. They believed in preparation. Marcus Aurelius would start his days expecting people to be selfish, rude, dishonest, and because he expected it, he wasn't surprised. His peace wasn't broken because he didn't build it on false hopes. He built it on reality, on acceptance. At night, we have a chance to do the same. Not to expect disaster, but to rehearse resilience. To practice strength when nothing is on fire, so that when something actually does burn, you don't freeze. This doesn't mean you dwell on negativity. It means you test yourself just enough to build confidence. Think of it like lifting a mental weight. You wouldn't train your muscles by lifting empty air. You need resistance, and the same is true for the mind. A little pressure, a little friction, handled consciously, builds something unshakable inside you. When you practice negative visualization at night, you also train yourself to let go. You see that, yes, you might lose things, people, comfort, control, but what you don't lose is your choice. How you respond, what you do next, the calm within you that no one can take. This is where sleep begins to feel different. It's not about escaping, it's about resting with nothing hidden, nothing repressed. You've already met the monsters in your mind. You shook their hands. You said, "I see you, and now I'm going to sleep anyway." The act of negative visualization also helps you value what you have. When you consider the possibility of losing it, your perspective sharpens. Your senses come alive. You begin to appreciate your current reality more deeply without needing it to last forever. Gratitude becomes real, not performative. You're not just grateful because it sounds good. You're grateful because you've tasted the idea of losing it, and now you hold it with softer, more loving hands. This softens anxiety in a powerful way, because fear often clings hardest to the things we haven't accepted could ever leave. But when you've rehearsed loss, even briefly, you stop clinging so tightly. You stop living from a place of desperation. You start seeing everything as a gift, not a guarantee. And that's when peace sneaks in. Quietly, gently, honestly. There's something calming about knowing you've already gone to the edge of the worst, and you're still here, still breathing, still capable. That's where courage lives. Not in pretending bad things can't happen, but in knowing they might, and still choosing to live with open eyes and an open heart. This practice also clears mental clutter. Anxiety thrives on surprise, on the unknown. But when you've already met the possibility of pain in your mind, it no longer owns you. You stop living in vague fear. You start living in clarity. When you mentally rehearse what you're afraid of, bankruptcy, rejection, failure, you also realize how much energy you've wasted avoiding these thoughts. How much effort goes into pretending things will always be okay. That illusion is exhausting, but when you strip it away and face life honestly, you conserve energy. You return to the present, and you sleep deeper, because you're no longer hiding from the truth. The beauty of this ritual is that it doesn't require perfection. You don't need to meditate perfectly or visualize in the right way. You just need to sit with your fears, calmly, without resistance. Observe them, speak to them, let them pass. Over time, this becomes a form of emotional strength training. And like all strength training, results come slowly, but they come. Eventually, something changes. You feel different, more grounded, less shaken. You start to trust yourself, not because you expect life to be easy, but because you know you're capable of doing hard things. Negative visualization is also a powerful teacher. It shows you where you're still attached, still holding on too tight. You might realize your fear of failure comes not from failure itself, but from the idea of losing status, approval, being seen a certain way. That insight is gold, because once you see the real root, you can begin to let it go. And when you let go of appearances, expectations, ego, you gain freedom, real freedom, the kind that makes you sleep better, not because the world changed, but because your inner world did. There's also a hidden gift in this practice. You become more compassionate. When you understand how fragile life is, you soften toward others. You stop taking things so personally. That stranger's anger doesn't ruin your mood. That delay doesn't steal your peace. You see it all in context, fleeting, uncertain, not worth sacrificing your sleep or your sanity. This kind of perspective doesn't numb you. It sharpens your presence. You feel more, you care more, but you also cling less. That's the paradox. The less you fear loss, the more love you're able to give freely. The less you avoid discomfort, the more peace you begin to experience. Negative visualization isn't about living in dread. It's about living in depth. Not just reacting to the surface of things, but truly seeing the layers underneath. And once you train your mind this way, sleep becomes an act of surrender. Not avoidance, not collapse, but surrender. A soft release of control because you already made peace with what might come. The Stoics understood that life is filled with uncertainty, but they refused to be ruled by it. They didn't wish for safety. They prepared for storms, and in doing so they became steady, not cold, not hard, but steady, anchored in something real. That's what this nighttime ritual offers you. A return to that anchor, a way to meet your deepest fears without flinching, a quiet strength that follows you into your dreams and stays with you when you wake up. And maybe that's what you've been searching for all along. Not the perfect answer, not guaranteed safety, but a calm, unshakable center in the middle of it all, where fear can visit but never stay, where sleep is no longer a battle, but a return to trust. You now understand what many never will. Peace isn't the absence of fear, it's the mastery of it. And the path to that mastery doesn't come through running, it comes through turning toward your fear, looking it in the eye and saying, I've already imagined the worst, and I am still here. Now, rest. You've already won the hardest battle, the one inside your own mind. And once you've rehearsed your fears, once you've walked through the darkness your mind tried to run from, you're left with something even deeper, something heavier, something we all carry but rarely speak about. It shows up in those quiet moments before sleep, in the tension in your chest, the unfinished conversations echoing in your head, the things you thought you had time for but didn't act on. Regret. But beneath that weight, there's one root truth pulling the strings, the fact that one day your time will run out. Death. The one truth that every human shares and the one most of us try to forget. But the Stoics didn't run from this truth. They leaned into it, not to live in fear, but to live without regret. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. It sounds cold, but it's not. It's one of the most powerful ideas the Stoics gave us. A reminder that life isn't just short, it's uncertain. That today could be your last sunrise, your final hug, your last conversation with someone you love. And that understanding, when held gently, not in fear, but in truth, is what releases the regret that clings to your mind like dust you never meant to carry. When you remember you will die, you stop wasting time. Not just in the big picture, but in the small things. You stop arguing over nonsense. You stop replaying that awkward moment from 2 weeks ago. You stop holding on to grudges that eat away at you, because now you see how precious each breath really is. The reason so many people can't sleep isn't just anxiety, it's unspoken guilt. It's the call they didn't make, the apology they held back, the dream they buried under excuses. Death brings clarity. It strips away the noise. It makes you ask, if this were my last day, would I be proud of how I lived it? And if the answer is no, good. That's your cue to change, to forgive, to speak, to act, not next week, now. This doesn't mean rushing or panicking. It means living on purpose, doing things that matter, saying things that are true, showing up fully, not because you know how long you have, but because you don't. The Stoics viewed death not as a threat, but as a teacher. Every time you feel afraid of something, a failure, an opinion, a rejection, ask yourself, would this matter if I were gone tomorrow? That lens clears the fog. It reminds you what's real. Holding death in your awareness also gives you peace, because it makes everything less permanent. That mistake you made 5 years ago, gone. That embarrassment you keep replaying, it won't survive you. You begin to see how little of what tortures you today will still matter in the end. Most of it disappears with time. The only thing that stays is how well you lived while you had the chance. This is how you let go of regret. You stop expecting to have forever. You start seeing each moment as sacred, even the ordinary ones. Drinking water, folding laundry, sitting in silence. When you know your time is limited, even these small things become a kind of worship. You become present not because someone told you to meditate, but because you feel how short life really is. And that presence clears your mind. It softens your heart. It helps you sleep, not because everything is fixed, but because you've stopped pretending you have unlimited time to fix it. Regret is heavy because it's filled with, I should have. But when you live with death in mind, those should-haves turn into did. You speak more honestly. You reach out more often. You show love before it's too late. This kind of living breaks cycles, because so many people are stuck in old patterns, waiting for a better time, waiting until they're ready, waiting until the fear goes away. But death doesn't wait. And that truth, accepted fully, is the most powerful motivator there is. You don't need to obsess over death. You don't need to fear it, but you do need to let it sharpen your awareness. The next time you start overthinking something meaningless, pause. Ask yourself, if this were my last night, is this how I want to feel? This question isn't morbid, it's freeing. It cuts through the endless stream of mental noise and brings you back to what really matters. Did I love well? Did I forgive quickly? Did I live bravely? When you start living this way, you release others too. You stop expecting people to be perfect. You stop holding them to standards you don't meet yourself. You stop pretending you have forever to fix broken relationships. You become more patient, more kind, more real. And here's what no one tells you. Death awareness also heals your relationship with yourself. Because when you know that one day you'll be gone, you stop being so hard on the person you are. You forgive yourself for being messy, for not having it all figured out. You realize that being alive, being conscious, being able to feel at all, that's the miracle. And when you see life this way, you start letting go of control. You stop trying to perfect every outcome. You release the need to get even, to win every argument, to prove your worth to people who were never watching. Because death shows you, none of that matters. What matters is how you feel when your head hits the pillow at night. Peace is not in fixing everything. It's in making peace with what can't be changed. This way of thinking isn't just for philosophers or monks, it's for you. It's for anyone who wants to sleep without the weight of unfinished things dragging their mind into the past. And you don't need to wait until you're old or sick to start. You can start tonight, right now. You can ask, what am I holding on to that I would let go of if I knew I had 1 week left? That grudge, that shame, that resentment. What conversation would I finally have? What part of myself would I stop hiding? Who would I say I love you to without waiting for the perfect moment? And then do that. Not as a dramatic gesture, but as a way of living honestly. Memento mori is not a warning, it's a mirror. It shows you how precious your breath is. It puts time back into your hands by reminding you how quickly it slips away. You don't need to panic to live this way. You just need to care, to pay attention, to realize that every second spent in regret is a second you're not using to live. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be present. That's what the Stoics understood. They didn't chase happiness. They chased clarity, because they knew that when you see life as a limited gift, joy grows naturally from that. This is why contemplating death brings peace, not fear, because it brings your mind back to truth. And truth is always lighter than illusion. Truth says, you won't be here forever. So don't waste today trying to be someone you're not. Don't carry guilt that's already served its purpose. Don't let pride keep you from saying the thing you know you need to say. And when you lie in bed tonight, instead of numbing your thoughts or chasing sleep, breathe. Bring to mind the reality that you are here, that you made it through the day, that you still have time to become more of who you are, and if there's anything unfinished, decide to change it tomorrow, but without guilt, without shame, only with intention, because memento mori isn't about dying. It's about living more deeply. It's about walking through life with eyes wide open, knowing that you don't control when it ends, but you do control how fully you show up while you're here. Let that thought be your comfort. Let it hold you gently. Let it sweep away the noise in your head and remind you that peace isn't something far away. It's right here, in your breath, in your awareness, in your choice to let go of what doesn't matter and give your heart fully to what does. Sleep now, not because everything is perfect, but because you've remembered what's real. And real things don't need to last forever to be worth everything. And once you've sat face to face with mortality, once you've let the final truth clear the noise, something else starts to come into focus. What you want, not in a surface way, but deep down. What you still chase, what still pulls at your attention, distracts your sleep, drives your thoughts long after the world has gone quiet. That quiet craving, the unfinished wanting, the itch for more. This is where many find themselves stuck, alive and aware, yet unsettled. Not because anything is wrong, but because desire is still whispering, subtle, persistent, and disguised as ambition, progress, even love. And that's where peace slips away again, just when it was in reach. Desire itself isn't the enemy. Wanting isn't wrong. But unexamined desire, the kind that owns you, that keeps your mind spinning through the night, that's where suffering begins. Epictetus warned of this. He taught that freedom doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from learning not to need what you don't. When you're lying in bed, physically still but mentally wired, it's often because your mind is running after something it hasn't caught. A goal unmet, a person not responding, a version of yourself you think you should already be. The chase doesn't stop just because your body has, it continues, and sleep becomes a negotiation between your present reality and a mind still obsessed with what's missing. This is the pain of craving. It doesn't only apply to material things, it shows up in needing to be liked, needing to prove yourself, needing certainty in situations you can't control. It's the voice that says, just one more thing, just one more step, just a little more time. And suddenly, rest is no longer possible, because your value, your peace, has become a moving target. The Stoics saw this clearly. Epictetus said, Freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it. Not by denying joy, but by understanding that every craving attaches you to something outside of yourself, something you cannot fully command, and every attachment comes with a cost. The more tightly you grip it, the more your peace slips through your fingers. Think of desire like tension in a rope. The more you pull, the more resistance you create. Eventually, you don't even remember why you started pulling in the first place. You just feel the strain. You can't relax. You can't breathe. And when that tension follows you into bed, it takes your rest hostage. So how do you loosen the grip without becoming cold or passive? It starts with seeing clearly. Most desires that keep us restless aren't truly ours. They've been shaped by noise, by culture, by comparison, by a lifetime of messages saying we're not enough until we have more. More money, more praise, more attention, more milestones. But the truth is, your worth isn't waiting at the end of those goals. It's here, now, not earned, but present. When you remind yourself of this before sleep, your body starts to relax. Your nervous system starts to slow, because it no longer feels the need to chase a moving target. You are no longer negotiating your value with some imagined finish line. You simply are, and that is enough. One of the most powerful things Epictetus taught was to focus only on what is up to us, not halfway, not sometimes, fully. He asked, "Is this thing within my control?" And if the answer was no, he let it go, not because he didn't care, but because he cared deeply about protecting his peace. This discipline of desire is not repression, it's redirection. It's not about pretending you don't want things. It's about training your mind not to be owned by them. When you master this, your nights become quieter, not because life is perfect, but because your mind no longer flinches every time it doesn't get what it wants. You begin to understand the weight desire adds to your life, a weight you might not have noticed until now. It can disguise itself as motivation, but when examined, it often comes with fear. Fear of not being seen, fear of missing out, fear of never being enough. When you release desire, you release that fear too. And fear is what keeps you from sleeping. Desire also shows up in memories, wishing things had turned out differently, wishing someone had stayed, wishing you had taken a different path. But these desires for a past that cannot be changed are just as draining as the ones for a future you don't control. When you recognize this, you give yourself permission to close the loop, to say, what's done is done. I no longer need anything from it. And then there's the craving for perfection, the restless need to fix every flaw, to have everything just right before you rest. But peace isn't perfection. It's presence. It's knowing that life will always be slightly unfinished. And yet, that doesn't mean you are. It doesn't mean you have to wait to feel whole. You can feel it now, even in the mess, even in the middle. The discipline of desire teaches you that wanting something is not the same as needing it. You can still have dreams, still strive for more, but from a place of stillness, not desperation. From a sense of abundance, not lack. This shift is subtle, but it changes everything, because now your peace is no longer tied to outcome, and your sleep is no longer delayed by what you haven't yet achieved. This is also why letting go of craving isn't defeat. It's freedom. It allows you to live more lightly, to move through your day without dragging invisible chains, to feel contentment, not because everything is perfect, but because you've stopped expecting it to be. Desire narrows your focus. It makes you obsess over one thing, one outcome, one version of success. But when you release it, your awareness expands. You start to notice beauty in small things, a quiet moment, a breath, a connection that doesn't need to be impressive to be meaningful. And that softness, that widening of the lens, is what opens the door to rest. Some nights your craving will feel strong. It will disguise itself as urgency, as unfinished business. That's when you return to the question, is this within my control right now? If not, let it go for now. Not forever, just for tonight. Let your bed be a sacred space where your peace is not up for negotiation. There's a deep kind of discipline in that, a quiet power, the kind that doesn't come from force, but from clarity, from remembering that you don't have to chase everything you think you need, that sometimes stillness is the boldest action you can take. And in that stillness, you begin to heal your relationship with wanting itself. You no longer see desire as the enemy, but as a signal, a teacher, a message pointing you back inward. What do I think this thing will give me? And is it possible I already have that within me? Often you'll find that what you're really chasing is peace, love, approval, safety. But those are inner states. And when you stop outsourcing them to the outside world, you begin to feel something new. Not a high, not a spike of pleasure, but a calm, a gentle knowing that you are already enough, and nothing you gain or lose will change that. From this place, sleep becomes natural. You are no longer mentally reaching, no longer stretching toward things just out of reach. You are here, rooted, present. And when thoughts of craving arise, you meet them with understanding, not with resistance. You say, I see you, but I no longer need you to feel whole. The discipline of desire also deepens your relationships. You no longer use people to fill gaps. You stop needing them to behave a certain way so you can feel okay. You begin to love with fewer conditions, fewer expectations. And this love, free from needing, is often the most powerful kind. Even your view of the future changes. You stop obsessing over every outcome. You start preparing without attaching, planning without obsessing. You begin to live in a way that is both focused and free. And your nights stop being restless because your mind is no longer rehearsing what might go wrong or clinging to what might go right. You find yourself releasing things faster, forgiving quicker, holding your emotions with more grace, because now you're not clinging to them to feel alive. You're simply noticing, witnessing, flowing. And in this gentle flow, rest becomes more than sleep. It becomes your natural state. This is what Epictetus was pointing toward. Not a life without joy, but a life without chains. A life where sleep is no longer stolen by a mind caught in loops of wanting. Where you can close your eyes, not out of exhaustion, but out of peace. And if one night the cravings return, and they will, you meet them not with shame, but with awareness. You say, I don't need to fight you. I just need to return to what's real, to what's mine, to what cannot be taken away. That is the discipline of desire. A slow, steady return to enough. A quiet revolution inside your own heart. And a freedom that lets you rest, not because you got everything you wanted, but because you finally understood you don't need to. And once you've loosened your grip on craving, once you've seen clearly that you are not defined by what you want or what you lack, something opens up in you, a kind of quiet space where strength can grow. A strength that isn't loud or flashy, but steady. Still, there's something else worth understanding. Because letting go of desire doesn't mean staying soft or sheltered. Peace isn't just about detachment. It's also about preparation. about being ready, not in fear, but with calm. The Stoics understood that life will bring pain, failure, loss, and discomfort, whether we ask for it or not. But here's the secret. They didn't wait for those moments to toughen them. They chose to train themselves while things were still calm. They stepped into discomfort on purpose, not because they enjoyed pain, but because they knew something most people never learn. If you meet difficulty by choice, you don't fear it when it comes by surprise. Voluntary discomfort is the act of placing yourself into slight unease, not recklessly, but wisely. It's sleeping without a pillow once in a while, walking instead of driving when it's inconvenient, eating less than you want just to remind yourself you don't need excess to survive. These choices might seem small, even pointless, but their power runs deep. Each time you take on discomfort willingly, you teach your body that not having doesn't mean suffering, that lacking isn't the same as being broken, that you are capable of more than comfort would have you believe. You begin to feel less fragile. You stop seeing challenge as a threat, and instead recognize it as an opportunity to test what you're really made of. This is how resilience is built. Not in theory, not in talk, but in quiet, consistent practice. In saying no to ease just long enough to strengthen your mind. This doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become clear. You no longer fear hard things because you've already shown yourself you can handle them. When you train in this way, your mind becomes calmer, because one of the deepest causes of anxiety is the fear of what might happen if things get worse. But once you've practiced being without, practiced failing gracefully, practiced losing and starting again, that fear loses its edge. It turns into something you can face, not something that controls you. The body may not like discomfort, but the soul grows from it. And it's not about becoming numb or harsh. It's about becoming ready. When life takes something from you, whether comfort, status, health, or ease, you've already practiced the art of letting go, so it doesn't destroy you. It may hurt, but it doesn't shake your foundation. Voluntary discomfort also resets your relationship with pleasure. You stop needing comfort every hour to feel okay. You begin to see how easily modern life trains people to avoid every form of difficulty. But with that avoidance comes weakness. When we never let ourselves be tested, we forget how strong we truly are. Even a cold shower, skipped meal, or tech-free day can become powerful reminders. Reminders that comfort is not your master, that you can be uncomfortable and still be calm, still be kind, still be at peace. The more you do this, the more your identity shifts, from someone who fears difficulty to someone who welcomes it as part of life. When you meet discomfort on your own terms, it no longer surprises you. That's the heart of this practice. To live without the constant fear of losing comfort. To know that your peace isn't tied to soft pillows or perfect days. It's inside you. And you know that because you've seen it survive even in discomfort. This also changes the way you see others. You stop judging people for how polished they look or how easy their life seems. You begin to value depth, resilience, grit. Not the kind that boasts, but the kind that quietly endures, because you now know what it takes to remain steady when things are hard. You've lived it, even if only in small ways, and those small ways matter. Great strength doesn't come from dramatic moments. It comes from daily choices, from willingly walking the harder path, not because you have to, but because you know it builds something real, something lasting. Voluntary discomfort also teaches gratitude in a way that nothing else can. When you've gone without comfort, luxury, ease, you start to see everyday blessings as what they are: gifts. A warm bed becomes something to cherish. A meal, a conversation, a walk in the sun. These aren't background noise anymore. They're miracles. Because now you're not entitled. You're awake. And that awareness makes life feel fuller, even in its simplicity. This discipline even helps with emotional pain. When you choose discomfort, you're also practicing emotional exposure. You might sit with the feeling of rejection, loneliness, or disappointment without rushing to fix it. You learn to be with your emotions without running from them. And in doing so, you stop being afraid of your inner life. You become a friend to your own experience. And here's something unexpected. When you embrace discomfort voluntarily, you often become more gentle, not more hardened. Because strength isn't about becoming cruel, it's about becoming unbreakable and compassionate. You stop needing to protect yourself from every hard thing. You've proven you can feel pain and not be destroyed by it. You start to look at challenge and say, I've trained for this. And that mindset carries over to everything: work, relationships, loss, growth. You become grounded, stable, calm, because you no longer see struggle as something to run from. You've made peace with it. In a world that constantly tells you to avoid pain, to chase comfort, to indulge every desire, this practice feels radical. But it's not about punishment. It's about remembering what you are capable of. And once you do, your fear of life shrinks. Because you are no longer waiting for everything to stay easy in order to feel okay. That fear of loss, that fear of discomfort that keeps so many people from resting, it fades. Because now you've proven to yourself that you can face the storm and still be standing. You don't need guarantees. You don't need everything to go your way. You just need to know that no matter what comes, you can meet it fully. This is what the Stoics knew. This is why they walked barefoot in the cold, slept on hard ground, fasted, practiced rejection. Not to suffer, but to prepare, to train their minds to be free from dependency on comfort. And in that freedom, they found peace. You can find it too. And it doesn't take extreme actions, just small, conscious choices. Say no when it's easier to say yes. Step into silence when noise is more comforting. Do without, just long enough to remember that you can. And when you lie down at night, you'll feel it. That quiet strength humming beneath the surface. That peace that doesn't need the world to be perfect to feel steady. The comfort that comes not from avoiding hardship, but from having already met it and survived. This kind of rest is different. It's not shallow, it's deep, it's earned. Because now you don't sleep to escape. You sleep to restore, to continue walking through life with clarity, not fear, with presence, not distraction. And when discomfort inevitably returns, when life takes something from you or asks more than you expected, you won't collapse. You'll stand, because you've practiced standing. That's the gift of this practice. Not just the absence of fear, but the presence of confidence. Not loud, but lasting. And in that space, even on the hardest days, sleep comes. Because your mind knows you are ready. And after you've met discomfort willingly, after you've tasted the strength that comes from choosing challenge over ease, something else becomes possible: clarity. That clarity isn't just found in struggle, it's found in reflection. Because even the strongest mind can become clouded. Even the most disciplined person can carry invisible weight into the night. Thoughts left unresolved, feelings not yet understood. And when those are ignored, they don't disappear. They linger. They press on your chest as you try to fall asleep. That's why the Stoics turned inward before bed, not to overthink, but to understand. Seneca had a habit that kept his mind clean, not just organized, but light. Every night before sleep, he would sit with himself and ask honest questions. What did I do well today? Where did I fall short? Did I say something I regret? Did I let emotion take the lead? Did I act according to my values? It wasn't self-punishment. It was maintenance, a kind of soul hygiene, and it's just as useful now as it was 2,000 years ago. The point of a nightly self-audit is not to obsess or ruminate, it's to clear. To gently examine the day you just lived, not with shame, but with sincerity. The purpose is not perfection, it's alignment. You look at where you drifted from who you want to be, not because you failed, but because you care enough to come back to yourself. Each day, no matter how still we try to be, we collect noise, opinions we didn't ask for, reactions we wish we handled differently, moments where fear won. And if we don't review those gently and honestly, they pile up. They become mental weight, emotional clutter, the kind that doesn't just affect your mood, but your sleep. The act of reviewing your day creates closure. And closure doesn't require grand conclusions, it only needs your attention. When you sit down, even for 5 minutes, and walk through the past 24 hours, you give your mind a signal. Nothing is being ignored, and the mind that feels seen, heard, understood, that mind rests easier. This practice also builds self-trust, because every night you get a chance to return to yourself, to listen to how you showed up in the world, to adjust, not to judge, but to realign. Over time, this leads to a stronger inner compass. You stop reacting blindly and start choosing how you move through your life. Your actions start matching your values more often, and when that happens, you sleep with fewer regrets. Seneca spoke of the peace that comes from knowing you've examined your day, that nothing was left hiding in the corners, that even your mistakes have been faced with honesty. There's a quiet power in that, not the power of performance, but the power of presence. Because it's not the day that keeps most people up, it's the parts they didn't process. The words left unsaid, the moments they avoided thinking about. This reflection doesn't need to be written, but writing helps. When you put pen to paper, your thoughts take shape. You see the patterns more clearly. You catch the moments where you rushed, where you lost patience, where ego took over. And more importantly, you begin to understand why. You don't just observe your day, you learn from it. And learning softens guilt. It turns mistakes into stepping stones, which is why the more you reflect, the less shame you carry. Even your emotions benefit from this nightly practice. When you take time to feel, name, and understand them, they stop screaming for your attention at night. They settle. You begin to see that most emotional turmoil doesn't come from the feelings themselves, but from being ignored. When you reflect, you say to yourself, I'm here, I'm listening. Let's look at this together. And that brings something rare into your life: consistency. Most people drift. They don't realize how far they've wandered from their values until something goes wrong. But when you reflect every night, you stay close to yourself. You stay tuned in. And that awareness helps you grow without needing crisis to force you back on track. The act of reflecting also strengthens your emotional control, because the more you review your reactions, the more prepared you are for tomorrow's triggers. You begin to see your weak points, not to be ashamed, but to understand where more presence is needed. You begin to anticipate where you usually get defensive, where you rush, where your pride speaks louder than your principles. And this gives you choice, which is the core of Stoicism, awareness that leads to freedom. Reflection doesn't just help with mistakes, it also helps you celebrate progress. And most people forget this part. Every night is also a chance to say, I'm proud of myself for that moment, for that word I held back, for the help I gave, for the time I chose patience when anger would have been easier. These little victories build self-respect. They remind you that growth is happening, even when it's quiet. This practice is also an antidote to self-deception. We all tell ourselves stories. We justify our worst behavior. We minimize our faults. But when you sit with yourself, with no audience, no need to impress, those stories fall away. What's left is real, maybe messy, but honest. And honesty is the beginning of peace. A mind that reflects before bed is a mind that doesn't carry the past into the next day. You begin each morning lighter, more focused, less tangled in what's behind you. That's the real value of this practice. It doesn't just help you sleep, it changes how you wake up, because clarity at night becomes clarity at dawn. And the best part, this is something no one can take from you. You don't need a journal, you don't need a ritual, you only need the willingness to look inward, even for a few minutes, even if all you say to yourself is, what went well, what didn't, what will I try again tomorrow? That small pause becomes a mirror, one that doesn't judge, it just reflects. And slowly, you stop fearing what you see. You start using it. You start shaping your life from that honest reflection, rather than from guilt, reaction, or avoidance. You may notice some nights are harder than others. Some days carry more disappointment, more conflict, more temptation. That's okay. Those are the days when reflection is most powerful. When you sit with the hardest moments instead of pushing them away, you grow faster than most people ever will. Not because you're perfect, but because you're willing to face what others run from. This doesn't mean every night must end with a breakthrough. Sometimes the most valuable reflection is quiet acknowledgement. Today wasn't my best, but I see it. And I'll try again tomorrow. That sentence is a door, a way to release pressure without releasing responsibility. Over time, your mind begins to trust that nothing will go unseen. You create emotional closure at the end of each day. And with that closure comes rest. Not because you forced your brain to shut off, but because you gave it what it needed: attention, honesty, and a chance to be heard. This practice also transforms how you relate to others. When you reflect on your behavior each night, you catch your habits, the ways you speak, the moments you cut someone off, the tone you used. You begin to repair, to apologize faster, to avoid repeating the same mistakes. Because now you're not just reacting, you're remembering. And that memory sharpens your character. Even your sense of time changes. You start to live more deliberately. Because you know the day will end with reflection, you move through it with more presence. You speak with more care. You treat yourself and others with more awareness. You stop wasting hours on things that drain you. And at night, you sleep easier. Because you didn't just exist that day. You lived it on purpose. That's the real power of a nightly audit. It makes your life more conscious, more connected, more rooted in who you actually want to be. Seneca didn't reflect to be perfect. He reflected so he wouldn't drift, so he wouldn't be a stranger to his own choices, so he could meet himself honestly each night and adjust accordingly. And you can do the same. It's not complicated. You just ask, where did I grow? Where did I get stuck? Where did I show up well? Where do I want to show up better? Let those answers guide you, not to punish, but to realign. Then you can rest, not because the day was flawless, but because nothing was left unexamined, nothing was buried, nothing was ignored. You showed up, you saw, you learned, and that's enough. That kind of rest is the deepest kind, because it's earned through presence, through truth, through the courage to meet your own life, night after night, with open eyes and a willing heart. And once you've finished your nightly reflection, once you've held up the mirror and looked at yourself honestly, without turning away, without shame, you might still find something lingering beneath it all, a kind of tension, a quiet pressure, not from what you've done, but from what you can't seem to control. Even after clearing the clutter of your day, your mind might still reach, still pull, still grasp at things outside your power. The outcome of a decision someone else will make. The timeline of a dream that hasn't come true. The way another person thinks or feels. These things keep many people awake, not because they are urgent, but because they are out of reach. This is where the Stoic teaching of Epictetus meets your restless mind. His most powerful and repeated idea was this: some things are up to us, and some things are not. That's it, the dichotomy of control. It sounds simple, even obvious, but most of our suffering comes from ignoring this line. We try to control what is not ours. We try to bend outcomes. We cling to the illusion that more thinking, more planning, more worrying will somehow force life to move the way we want. And that illusion is one of the most exhausting things we carry. Insomnia often comes from this tension, a body that's tired, but a mind that's still trying to manage what it can't touch. Sleep becomes difficult, not because there's something to fix, but because we can't let go. We review conversations we can't change. We rehearse situations that already happened. We worry about futures we can't predict, all because our minds haven't fully accepted the boundaries of what belongs to us and what doesn't. Epictetus taught that what's truly ours includes our thoughts, our choices, our responses. Everything else, our reputation, other people's decisions, external events, is not. He wasn't saying we should stop caring. He was saying we should stop trying to control outcomes through force. Instead, we should direct our energy inward, toward our own behavior, our own mind, our own peace. This shift changes everything. Not because the world becomes easier, but because we stop resisting it. Most people don't realize how much energy they lose fighting the flow of life. They hold on to imaginary strings, trying to pull things their way. But those strings are illusions. They snap, and the more we pull, the more tangled we become. Letting go of control doesn't mean giving up. It means recognizing what belongs to you and what doesn't. When you see that clearly, you conserve energy. You stop spinning stories about how things should be and begin to meet things as they are. That acceptance creates room for rest. Your nervous system calms because it no longer believes it's responsible for holding the whole world together. This practice doesn't come from ignoring problems. It comes from facing them with clarity. When you're in bed and your mind starts circling around a decision that hasn't been made or a fear you can't solve, pause. Ask yourself, is this within my control right now? If it is, make a small step, a plan, a note for tomorrow. But if it's not, then the only wise choice is release. Letting go becomes an act of strength, not weakness. Letting go also doesn't mean you stop feeling. The Stoics didn't teach indifference. They taught resilience. Feelings still arise, worry, grief, frustration, but they don't have to run the show. You can feel something deeply and still choose not to be consumed by it. You can care without controlling. This is especially powerful at night, because night is when the pretending ends. The distractions are gone. The world is quiet. And in that silence, your mind shows you what it's still holding on to. That's your invitation, not to fix it all, but to gently place it down. Not forever, just for now. You'll return to it tomorrow, if needed. But tonight is for rest, and rest is only possible when you are no longer resisting what you cannot change. This mental separation between what's yours and what isn't is a skill. It takes time. At first, everything feels like your responsibility. But as you practice, your awareness sharpens. You begin to see how much of your anxiety comes from crossing that invisible line, wanting people to react a certain way, wanting life to hurry up, wanting the past to be different. All things outside your hands. And each time you catch yourself grasping at those things, you can return to what is yours. Your breath, your posture, your response, your choice to let go in this moment. That's where freedom lives, not in changing everything around you, but in being unchanged by what you can't control. There's humility in this, and also power, because once you stop wasting energy on the external, you can fully invest in the internal, in becoming calmer, clearer, wiser, and that internal shift is often all it takes to handle external chaos with grace. Even when things go wrong, even when outcomes disappoint you, you remain steady. Because your peace wasn't built on things going your way. It was built on understanding what was never yours to begin with. The mind that lives like this doesn't need sleep aids. It doesn't need to numb itself to rest. It only needs a clear boundary, a conscious moment of saying, "This I will act on, that I will release." And when that becomes a habit, sleep comes more easily. Not because your life is perfect, but because your mind is at peace with imperfection. This practice also helps you respond better during the day. You stop being reactive. You stop trying to fix people. You stop needing everyone to agree with you, because you now know the limit of your influence. And in that knowing, there's peace. Not passive peace, but powerful peace. The kind that lets you focus on what really matters. Your character, your effort, your principles. Letting go of control also prepares you for the unexpected. When life throws something at you, you don't panic. You pause. You ask, "What can I influence here?" And then you act, not with desperation, but with clarity. And when you've done all that's within your power, you stop, you let go again, and rest. There's a rhythm in this way of living, a back and forth between action and surrender, between effort and rest. It's not about being detached, it's about being responsible only for what is yours, and refusing to be weighed down by what is not. This is why Epictetus said that happiness begins with knowing what depends on us and what does not. Because until you know that, you'll keep trying to manage everything. And in trying to manage everything, you'll manage nothing well. You'll stay up late, thinking about things that won't change, because thinking isn't the tool they need. Sometimes the right action is stillness. Sometimes the best response is no response. That wisdom only comes when the mind is trained to see the line between its role and reality. The more you live like this, the more natural it becomes. You stop needing to be in control to feel safe. You stop needing guarantees to feel calm, because you've built your peace on something real, your own choices, your own discipline, your own ability to return to center even when the world is spinning. This is not just theory. This is something you can feel in your body, in your breath, in your heart rate at night. Letting go of control lowers the tension in your muscles. It softens your chest. It slows your thoughts. It creates the space your nervous system needs to shift from survival to rest. And the beauty of this is that it's always available. You don't need the world to change. You don't need anyone's permission. You just need the willingness to see clearly. This is mine. That is not. With that clarity, you become more compassionate. You stop trying to fix everyone. You stop needing to be right. You start listening more and reacting less. Because now you know your job is not to control others, it's to control yourself. And when you do that well, the rest often takes care of itself. At night, when your thoughts begin to spin, use this lens. Gently separate what belongs to you from what doesn't. Keep what is yours, your breath, your mindset, your intention, and set the rest down, like weights you no longer need to carry. And as your head rests on the pillow, let this final thought guide you into sleep. I release what isn't mine. I hold only what I can change. And in that, I am free. This is the freedom Epictetus taught. Not freedom from hardship, but freedom from being ruled by it. And when you live that truth, rest isn't something you chase. It's something that finds you, because a mind at peace with what it can't control is a mind ready to sleep, peacefully, fully, without resistance. And once you've learned to release what doesn't belong to you, once you've stopped wrestling with things outside your reach, something else begins to stir beneath the quiet, something deeper than anxiety, quieter than fear, a feeling you may not speak out loud, but one that shows up when the lights go out and your body lies still. It's not about control anymore. It's about surrender. That hard-to-name discomfort we often carry into sleep isn't always from the day we lived, but from the truth we try not to face. The end, the final silence, the unknown we all share but rarely approach with calm. Sleep, when viewed without distraction, carries a strong resemblance to death, the stillness, the letting go, the full release of awareness, identity, and will. And for many, that's why it's so hard, because sleep is not just rest, it's a small rehearsal for what we cannot escape. And if death brings dread, sleep brings resistance. The fear of not waking up, of vanishing into silence, of stepping into something we don't understand. The Stoics didn't run from this comparison. They walked toward it. They believed that learning to die before you die was a path to freedom, not in a dramatic sense, but in a deeply honest one. Accepting death wasn't about obsession. It was about clarity. When you see it clearly, you stop fearing it. And when you stop fearing death, you begin to sleep without resistance. Not because the unknown is solved, but because you are no longer fighting it. The link between sleep and death becomes a tool, not a threat. Each night becomes a small opportunity to let go, to practice what it means to surrender fully, not in defeat, but in peace. You lie down, you close your eyes, and in that moment, you stop everything. The need to fix, to change, to explain, to prove, gone. You return to nothing, and that nothing is not a problem. It is part of life. The Stoics encouraged reflection on mortality because it brought urgency to life and peace to rest. When you remember that your time is not endless, you stop wasting it. And when you stop fearing the end of it, you rest more easily between beginnings and endings. Sleep becomes softer, not because your thoughts disappear, but because they stop needing to be solved tonight. Death, too, requires no solution, only understanding. At night, the part of your mind that fears disappearing starts to whisper. It says, "What if I don't wake up?" And the answer the Stoics would give is this: then let your sleep be peaceful. Let it be an act of courage. Let it be your gift to the day. You don't fear the sunset, you trust it will return. And if one night it doesn't, your fear will no longer be useful. So let go now, while you still can, not to rush the end, but to stop fearing it. There's a calm strength that comes from holding the end of life in your awareness without panic. When you acknowledge it quietly each night, it loses its power to haunt you. It becomes part of the rhythm. Wake, live, sleep, and eventually release. That rhythm is already happening. Death is not something separate. It's folded into every moment you let go, every breath you exhale, every chapter you close. When you begin to see sleep as a mirror for death, you also begin to see how unnecessary most resistance is. The fear of not being in control, the fear of missing out, the fear of disappearing. But if you can let yourself slip into sleep fully, without bracing, without grasping, then you've already begun to understand death, and not as a punishment, as a return, a pause, a silence that holds no malice, only release. This perspective shifts how you approach the night. You stop needing to hold on to every task, every plan, every identity. You don't need to fall asleep thinking about your role, your name, your status, or your progress. Because in sleep, those things fade, and still you are safe. You are not harmed by their absence. You are simply resting. That understanding prepares your mind for the truth of existence, that much of what we fear losing doesn't define us. It supports us, but when it's gone, we are still here. Or, when we're not, there's no more suffering. That paradox helps dissolve the tension that keeps people from sleep, because they no longer believe they must grasp tightly to live fully. You begin to feel that your value doesn't disappear when you do, that your legacy isn't built through sleepless striving, but through presence, through how deeply you show up while you're still here. That truth settles into your body like weight released. You breathe more deeply, you need less noise, you welcome rest, even if it resembles the end. And so each night you can let yourself slip into sleep as a brave act, as a choice to trust what you cannot hold, as a decision to stop running from what is already written into the nature of life. Not in sadness, but in reverence. This is what it means to accept death. You live without flinching. You rest without resistance. The more you practice this, the less your mind clings to the past, to mistakes, to endless planning. You start to feel that you do not have to hold everything. That surrender is not failure, but wisdom. And when your body feels safe to let go, your mind follows. Rest becomes easier, deeper, because it is no longer attached to certainty. Even your relationship with time changes. You stop needing to know how much is left. You stop racing. You stop measuring your worth by what you've accomplished before midnight, because now you see that your rest is part of your strength. It is not wasted time. It is trust in action. There is also a humbling clarity that comes with this awareness. It softens your grip on status, on possessions, on control over others. Because you understand that everything ends. And that understanding makes you more alive. Not frantic, but focused. More willing to speak kindly, to let go of minor tensions, to love openly, to forgive faster. The fear of death loses its grip the more you practice returning to stillness. Not just with your body, but with your thoughts. You begin to find comfort in that space of no urgency, a space that doesn't demand answers, just acceptance. The kind of peace that doesn't come from getting everything done, but from knowing you've done what matters. This doesn't mean you stop striving, but you stop striving from fear. You start acting from choice. And that's where your days become more beautiful. Because now they aren't fueled by dread. They are shaped by clarity. That clarity, in turn, makes your nights lighter. Even dreams begin to shift. Because your waking hours are no longer driven by avoidance, they are guided by awareness. That shift changes your nervous system. Your breath slows. Your muscles stop bracing. And sleep becomes more than recovery. It becomes renewal. When you see sleep as a practice in death acceptance, you stop thinking of death as something that interrupts life. You begin to see it as something that gives life shape, a frame that holds everything you do. And that frame, when accepted, makes every moment matter more. This changes how you respond to fear. When panic rises, you don't run, you sit, you breathe, you say, "If this is my last moment, let it be met with presence." That courage carries over into everything, into how you listen, into how you speak, into how you let go at the end of the day. Even if death still brings discomfort, it no longer rules you. Because now, each night you've practiced returning to it, just enough to soften its edge. You no longer flinch at the thought. You meet it with openness, not readiness necessarily, but acceptance. And from that, a new kind of calm grows. Your bed becomes more than a place to recharge. It becomes a sanctuary, a reminder that you are allowed to rest, that you are allowed to let go, that you are not defined by what you hold on to, but by how gracefully you can release. And if you lie awake some nights, not because of fear, but because of stillness, even that is okay. Even that is part of the practice. You are learning to be with what is, to stop reaching, to simply exist, without fixing, without fleeing, without forcing meaning onto every quiet moment. This is the deepest form of rest, not just of the body, but of the soul. A rest that says, "I am here." That is enough. A rest that doesn't need proof or promise or explanation, just surrender. And when you wake the next day, you bring that stillness with you, not as passivity, but as strength. Because now, your actions are shaped not by fear of the end, but by presence within the moment. That's what sleep teaches you, when you stop resisting its resemblance to death. So tonight, lie down gently. Let your thoughts quiet, not because they've vanished, but because they no longer need to be solved. Let yourself rest as if this is your last night, not in dread, but in reverence. Let go, fully, because that's where real peace lives, in the space between clinging and control, in the brave, silent act of surrender, in the willingness to stop chasing and simply fall into stillness, into rest, into life as it is. And after surrendering to sleep as a mirror of life's final silence, after learning how to rest without fear of the end, you come face to face with something essential, the need for protection, not physical, but internal. A place inside yourself untouched by noise, chaos, or judgment. Because even when you accept death, even when you stop chasing what isn't yours to hold, the world still presses in. People still hurt you. Stress still arrives. Noise still finds its way through the cracks. To withstand it, you need a shelter that moves with you, one no one can enter unless you let them. Marcus Aurelius called this the inner citadel. It isn't built with stone. It's built with attention, with discipline, with the slow, intentional shaping of your mind. The citadel is the part of you that remains whole when everything else feels broken. It's where you go when the world gets loud, where you return to when you're lost in other people's expectations, opinions, or mistakes. It's the space you create for yourself that no outside force can ruin. For Marcus, the citadel wasn't fantasy, it was necessity. He led an empire in crisis, faced loss, war, betrayal, illness, and disappointment. Yet his writings reflect a calm few people ever touch. Because he wasn't relying on the world for peace, he carried it inside, and he strengthened it daily. This is where modern life often leads us astray. We build our safety externally, on money, comfort, reputation, approval, but when those things shake, so do we. The Stoics knew that real peace isn't built outside of you, it's built inward. It has nothing to do with what happens, and everything to do with how you meet what happens. The citadel is not denial. It doesn't ignore pain. It welcomes it, studies it, responds with clarity. The reason it's impenetrable is not because it blocks emotion, but because it holds emotion with intelligence. It doesn't collapse. It doesn't depend on the mood of others. It doesn't need certainty to remain whole. To begin building your own, you start by observing. How quickly do you react to the opinions of others? How often do you lose yourself trying to keep the peace or prove your worth? Each time you leave yourself behind to meet expectations, you weaken your foundation. But each time you return, through breath, through silence, through reflection, you lay another stone in that inner wall. You protect this space not by isolation, but by boundaries. You decide what gets in, which thoughts are worth your energy, which criticisms carry truth, and which are projections. You begin to discern, and that discernment becomes your defense. Your citadel grows stronger the more you respond, not react. Reaction is automatic. It gives your power away. Response is deliberate. It says, I choose how I move, regardless of how the world pushes me. That choice builds integrity, and integrity builds safety. Not the safety of comfort, but the safety of self-respect. The fortress of the mind is quiet. It doesn't need to explain itself. It doesn't need to win arguments or seek validation. It knows that peace is not granted by others, it's claimed within, and that knowing changes how you experience everything. Traffic doesn't rattle you, criticism doesn't cut as deep, rejection stings but doesn't define you, because you no longer live on the surface of things. This space is also where you reconnect with what matters. It's where you return when distractions wear you down. You step back and ask, who am I beneath the noise? What do I value when no one's watching? These answers don't always come quickly, but they become clearer the longer you stay inside your citadel. This is also where you learn to separate yourself from your thoughts. The mind will still chatter, still judge, still fear. But in the citadel, you become the observer, not the prisoner. You notice without merging. You watch your own mind like clouds passing in a sky that stays calm underneath. This ability to observe creates space, and in that space, peace can grow, because now you're not swept away by every feeling. You're not arguing with reality. You're rooted in something deeper. That root keeps you still, even when the storm hits. The citadel doesn't remove discomfort. It teaches you how to carry it, without breaking, without hardening. It allows you to meet difficulty with dignity, to feel pain and still act with clarity. That's why it's called a fortress. Not because it keeps life out, but because it keeps you centered when life floods in. This also makes you harder to manipulate. When you know who you are, you stop changing to fit other people's ideas. You listen, but you don't twist yourself into shapes that don't belong to you. You stop performing, stop pretending. And in that authenticity, there is strength, the kind no one else can give or take. The more you build this place, the less afraid you are of being alone, because in solitude, you're not empty. You're grounded. Most people fear silence because they've never met themselves there. But in the citadel, you meet yourself again and again, and over time, that self becomes someone you trust. You begin to speak less, but say more. You start to act, not to impress, but to align, and even when you stumble, you return quickly, because you know the way home. That's what the citadel gives you, direction, a place to come back to when everything else asks you to leave yourself behind. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. The citadel is where you choose your thoughts deliberately. You clean the mind, not by force, but by awareness. You catch the lies you tell yourself. You challenge the fear. You name the emotions. And you do it consistently until truth becomes your habit. You carry this with you into conflict, into chaos, into disappointment. And while others shout or crumble, you remain grounded, not because you're better, but because you've trained, because you've returned to your center often enough that it stays with you. Even in grief, the citadel holds. It doesn't erase the pain, but it keeps you from drowning. You feel fully, but you don't get lost. You know how to stay open without being undone. And as this space grows stronger, it invites others. People feel safer around you, not because you fix them, but because your presence is steady. You become a quiet anchor in their storm, simply by holding your own. This kind of strength doesn't show up in obvious ways. It's in how you pause before speaking, in how you let others be wrong without needing to correct them, in how you keep your word without over-promising, in how you don't flinch when life doesn't go as planned. You live with more stillness, more depth. You stop chasing what doesn't matter, because from within your citadel, the world looks clearer. You see through illusions. You no longer need applause. You need alignment. This internal fortress also becomes your retreat. When the world is too much, you go inward, not to escape, but to reset, to breathe, to remember. And when you return, you're stronger, not louder, but more certain. You rest easier too, because your peace isn't fragile. It doesn't depend on the day going well. It's rooted in a structure you've built with attention and care. One thought at a time, one response at a time, one return to center at a time. Over time, this becomes who you are. Not someone who avoids life, but someone who lives it from within. Someone who walks calmly into chaos and holds their center when others lose theirs. And the best part? Anyone can build this. You don't need special talent or endless time. You just need to start. Begin noticing your thoughts. Begin choosing your responses. Begin protecting your attention. That's how the walls rise, quietly, steadily, one honest moment at a time. This is your citadel. Not a place to hide, but a place to rise from. A space so steady that no insult, no fear, no loss can shake your foundation. Because you are not built on noise. You are built on clarity, on presence, on truth. And when the world tries to pull you out, you return again and again to this fortress within, until one day you no longer have to return, because you've never left. And after building the inner citadel, after learning how to hold steady when the world pulls and pushes, there's one more enemy that still tries to slip through the cracks. One that doesn't knock at the door, but creeps through the mind in silence. Fear. It's subtle, but powerful. It doesn't always scream, it whispers. It wraps itself in thoughts that sound like truth, but are built on assumption, on distortion, on imagination dressed as fact. And unless we stop and look closely, we mistake that voice for reality. This is where the Stoics were different. They didn't try to defeat fear with emotion. They used reason. They didn't drown it with positivity. They exposed it with clarity. For them, fear was not a monster to run from. It was a puzzle to be solved, and the tool they used was logos, the guiding principle of logic, structure, and truth. Fear thrives in confusion. It grows in the space where thoughts are unchecked, where the worst-case scenario is accepted without challenge, where assumptions are left to multiply. But when you bring light to that space, when you slow down and examine the structure of the fear, it begins to unravel. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer makes sense. This is where deconstruction begins. You start with the fear as it is. You name it. You hold it in front of you. Then you begin to question it, not emotionally, but calmly. What am I really afraid of? What do I believe will happen? What proof do I have that it's true? What would actually happen if it did? Could I survive it? What could I do next? Fear wants you to stop at the feeling. Logic takes you further. Logic keeps asking. And every time you answer with honesty, fear loses its weight. You begin to see that many of your fears are made of incomplete thoughts, loose conclusions, unchallenged beliefs, and once you see through them, they lose their ability to control you. The Stoics practiced this daily. Marcus Aurelius would write to himself not to feel better, but to think clearer. When he feared criticism, he would ask, "Who is this person judging me? Do I respect their opinion? If not, why am I giving it power?" When he feared pain, he would break it down into parts. Is it unbearable? No. Is it permanent? No. Then why should it dominate my mind? This kind of thinking doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. You begin to treat fear not as a signal to panic, but as a sign to examine. You don't run. You pause. You listen. You study. And that calm attention is often all it takes to shift your state. Most panic doesn't come from what's real. It comes from what might happen, from stories, from future events we've already rehearsed in our heads as disasters. But logic grounds you. It brings you back to what is, not what could be, not what used to be, but what actually exists right now. This presence is powerful, because when you're present, fear has less room to grow. It loses the space it needs to spin. Your breathing deepens, your muscles loosen, your thinking becomes clearer. And that clarity isn't just a feeling, it's a process. You've questioned the fear until it's been stripped of everything false. This doesn't mean all fear disappears. Some things are worth being cautious about, but even those fears become manageable when they're specific. Logic doesn't erase risk, it shows you what the risk actually is. And that's when you can respond wisely instead of reacting blindly. One of the strongest forms of freedom is the ability to interrupt fear with truth, to stop the spiral before it picks up speed, to say, wait. What exactly am I afraid of? What's the evidence? What's within my control? What's not? What is this fear trying to protect me from? Is it useful right now or outdated? These questions are not random. They're intentional. They form a path through the noise, a way out of the panic. And the more you walk that path, the easier it becomes to find your footing next time. Even physical fear can be eased by thought. When your heart races, when your breath shortens, you can still direct the mind. You can say, "My body is reacting," but that doesn't mean the threat is real. Let's check. What's the danger? Where's the proof? Can I slow my breath and look at this more closely? That pause is the beginning of reason. And reason is what the Stoics trusted most. Not because they rejected emotion, but because they knew emotion without thought is unstable. It shifts too easily. It reacts too quickly. But thought, when grounded in truth, gives structure to the storm. You also begin to separate fear from identity. You stop saying, "I am afraid," and start saying, "Fear is present." That small change in language creates distance. And in that distance, you find freedom. You stop merging with the fear. You begin observing it. And anything you can observe, you can understand. Anything you understand, you can influence. This process is slow at first. It feels unnatural, because most of us have been trained to react immediately. But the Stoics trained themselves differently. They taught their minds to pause, to examine, to wait before believing every feeling. And in that training they became unshakable, not because nothing scared them, but because fear didn't own them. Fear also loses power when you look at the worst-case scenario clearly. Most people resist this step. They think that visualizing the worst will make it more real. But when done rationally, it does the opposite. It shrinks the unknown. It turns shadows into shapes, and shapes can be handled. You ask, if the worst happens, then what? What would I lose? What could I still do? Would I still be myself? Would I still be breathing? Would I still have options? Most of the time, the answer is yes. And even when it isn't, you find ways to adapt. Because the truth is, you are more resilient than your fear allows you to believe. Deconstructing fear through logic also helps you help others. When someone you care about is panicking, you don't just say, "Calm down." You guide them through their thoughts. You help them slow down, ask better questions, challenge the story they're telling themselves, and in doing so, you become a calm presence. Not just for yourself, but for those around you. This method becomes a habit. Each time you use it, the path becomes clearer, and over time, fear stops feeling like a wall. It becomes a doorway, a signal to examine, a challenge to meet with reason instead of reaction. You also become more honest with yourself. You stop pretending you're not afraid. You start acknowledging fear without judgment, and that honesty opens the door to healing. Because now, instead of hiding your fears, you learn from them. You ask why they're there, what they're pointing to, what they're trying to tell you. Often, fear reveals what you value, what you're not ready to lose. And when you see that clearly, you can protect what matters in a smarter way. Not with anxiety, but with intention. You also notice that many fears are inherited, passed down through culture, family, media, and they live in your body without ever being questioned. Logic helps you break that cycle. You begin to ask, is this fear mine, or did I borrow it? Do I still need it? Does it help me or limit me? This is how you create mental freedom, not by becoming fearless, but by becoming curious. You stop being afraid of fear itself. You become a thinker, not just a feeler. And in that balance, you find something rare, calm intelligence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That's the essence of this practice. Fear is not the event. Fear is your interpretation, and interpretations can be revised. So the next time fear rises, pause, ask, examine. Pull it apart like a mechanic would pull apart an engine. Don't flinch, just look. What's really there? What do you know for sure? What can you prove? What's just assumption? And then breathe. Choose your response and return to center. Because now you're not being led by fear. You're leading it, not with force, but with truth. Not by avoiding it, but by understanding it. This is what it means to dismantle fear through logos. And the more you do it, the more peace you find. Not because life gets easier, but because your mind gets clearer. And in that clarity, panic dissolves. And what's left is power. Quiet, steady power. The kind that knows exactly where to place its focus and exactly when to let go. And after you've looked fear in the eye and stripped it down to its parts, after using logic to calm your nerves and reclaim your thoughts, there's something left waiting for you beneath the surface. Something not talked about enough in Stoic practice, but always present for those who go deep enough. Joy. Not the fleeting kind that depends on pleasure or praise, but a steady, quiet gladness. The kind that doesn't shout, but hums beneath your daily life. It's there, hidden in the pauses, the simplicity, the clarity that comes when your mind is no longer ruled by fear, craving, or chaos. Stoicism is often misunderstood as cold or rigid, but the core of it is not emotional suppression, it's emotional refinement. And what's refined, when practiced fully, is joy. A joy that doesn't crash like a wave, but flows like a river. The Stoics called it eudaimonia, a flourishing of the soul that comes not from what happens, but from how you live. It's not found in more things, but in seeing what you already have with sharper eyes and a more grateful heart. This kind of joy comes when you start to live in alignment, when your actions match your values, when your expectations match reality, when your focus returns to what's within your control, and you stop leaking energy on everything else. In that harmony, a gentle kind of gladness rises, not a high, not excitement, but a peaceful sense of rightness, of being exactly where you need to be, without needing anything more. The key to this joy is attention, because joy is rarely missing, it's just overlooked. Drowned out by noise, buried under distraction, ignored in the chase for bigger and better. The Stoics didn't chase joy, they uncovered it, by stripping away illusion, by letting go of what didn't serve their character, by becoming so inwardly anchored that even the smallest experiences felt sacred. Gratitude was one of their tools, not as a cliché, but as a lens. Marcus Aurelius would write about waking up and being thankful for breath, for the ability to think, to act, to serve. Seneca reminded himself often that all he needed to live well was already in his possession: food, shelter, thought, breath, time. And once you realize that everything else is extra, joy comes naturally, not because life gave you more, but because you finally stopped waiting for it. Rational optimism also shaped this joy, not blind hope, but confidence rooted in logic. The understanding that even when things are hard, your ability to grow, to respond, to adapt, that doesn't disappear. That optimism comes from choosing to see what you can build, rather than fixating on what's gone. It means trusting that your character can carry you further than your circumstances ever could. And it's not a denial of pain. In fact, Stoic joy grows in full awareness of life's harshness. It doesn't pretend everything is fine. It knows that things are fragile, temporary, imperfect. And in that awareness, it says, "And still I will choose to notice the light, to be kind, to appreciate this moment." That is a deeper kind of happiness, one that doesn't break when life does. Joy, for the Stoics, also came from meaningful action. From doing what's right, not for praise, but because it aligns with reason. Every time you act in line with your nature, you strengthen your core. And that strength doesn't just build resilience, it builds contentment. You no longer feel like you're betraying yourself. You stop needing external validation to feel proud. And in that integrity, joy grows quietly. This practice also helps you love more freely. When you no longer depend on others for your sense of worth, you stop manipulating. You stop needing to control how others see you. You start giving more, expecting less. And that freedom opens the heart. It creates space for a kind of joy that isn't about what you receive, but about what you share. Joy becomes something you cultivate, not something you wait for. You train your mind to notice beauty where others see nothing. You learn to pause long enough to appreciate the way light moves through a window, the way someone speaks your name, the way your body carries you through the day. These aren't big things, but they're the whole of life when you stop skipping past them. Even challenges can hold joy, not in the suffering itself, but in the clarity it brings. Every hardship strips something away, and what's left, when you stop resisting, is often something more honest. You see who you are when comfort disappears. You find values that weren't clear before. You reconnect with strength you didn't know you had. And though it's not easy, that process can bring a calm kind of fulfillment. A joy that says, I faced it. I stayed true. I endured. This joy is durable. It survives bad news. It survives failure. Because it doesn't rely on external ease. It's rooted in your relationship with yourself, your philosophy, your capacity to choose how you think and respond. And that's the foundation for real contentment. Not that everything goes right, but that you go right even when things go wrong. That you meet each day with a kind of lightness, not because life is easy, but because you've stopped adding unnecessary weight. You've stopped trying to carry what was never yours. You've stopped chasing what doesn't serve your soul. Even boredom becomes something different. It's no longer something to escape. It becomes space. Space to breathe, to reflect, to reconnect with simple presence. You no longer need to be entertained every moment. You find that there is something satisfying about simply being, awake, alert, grounded. This practice also trains you to appreciate progress, not in big leaps, but in small steps. The joy of learning, of improving, of showing up a little more aligned than yesterday. You stop measuring your life by outcomes and start valuing the process. You stop waiting to arrive and begin living in the movement itself. That mindset creates emotional stability. You're less shaken by setbacks. You recover faster, not because you don't care, but because you know how to anchor your mind. You stop expecting happiness to come from things outside of you. And that shift returns control to where it belongs, your character, your choices, your outlook. This also opens the door to play. Yes, even in Stoicism. Playfulness is not immaturity, it's a sign of strength. When you are grounded, you can be light. You can laugh, explore, express, without fear of judgment or failure. You stop performing and start participating, and that engagement with life, as it is, creates joy without needing to chase it. It's in how you speak, how you walk, how you respond to small challenges with a smirk instead of stress. It's in how you enjoy your own company, how you take interest in others, how you stop needing everything to be perfect in order to feel alive. And when joy becomes this kind of practice, it lasts. Because it's not attached to conditions. It doesn't demand that your day be free from problems. It only asks that your mind return to the present, that it stay honest, that it remember what really matters. Even gratitude shifts. It's no longer a task, it's a lens. You see through it. You wake up and say, I have time, I have thought, I have people I care about, I have this moment. Nothing more is promised, but nothing more is needed for now. This creates a deep calm, a gentle gladness that becomes your background state. It doesn't mean you're always smiling. It means you're grounded, centered, whole. Even when life hurts, you carry that steady warmth, not because life is easy, but because your mind is free. And this joy, this quiet gladness, is what gives life richness. Not in volume, but in depth. Not in what you gather, but in how deeply you appreciate what you already hold. It's the kind of joy that makes you pause, that makes you breathe slower, that makes you care more. The Stoics understood this joy. They lived for it, not in excitement, but in alignment, not in things, but in thought. And when you live this way, joy stops being rare. It becomes your baseline, quiet, steady, true. And from that place, you rest better. Not because you're escaping anything, but because you're content. Not because everything is perfect, but because you've made peace with what is. That Stoic joy, not loud, but lasting, not flashy, but full. A way of moving through the world that keeps your heart open, your mind steady, and your days meaningful, no matter what they hold. And once you've uncovered that quiet current of Stoic joy, once you've started to live from presence instead of pressure, from value instead of expectation, your inner world becomes lighter, steadier. But even then, as night falls and you lay your head down, there are small details that still reach for your peace. The room feels too warm. A sound repeats outside your window. A flicker of light crosses your wall. And just like that, your body tenses again. The world is not loud, but it is loud enough to disrupt your rest. These interruptions are often treated as unavoidable. A squeaky ceiling fan, a distant voice in the hallway, a temperature that doesn't quite feel right. But the Stoics had a different response, not one rooted in control, but in detachment. Not from life, but from dependency. They taught that while we cannot always change our environment, we can always change how we relate to it. This mindset, when practiced consistently, becomes a key to restful sleep. Environmental indifference is not about ignoring discomfort. It's about learning not to let discomfort dominate your inner world. It's about recognizing the difference between noticing and reacting. The noise is real. The brightness exists. The temperature may be less than ideal, but whether those things disturb your peace, that part is not fixed. It can be trained. It can be loosened from your nervous system. The first step is accepting that perfect conditions are rare. Sleep, like peace, doesn't require perfection. It requires surrender. When you need everything to be silent, dark, and cool before your mind lets go, you've given away too much power. The Stoics would say that you've made your peace conditional, and what is conditional can always be taken from you. So the practice begins with shifting focus. You start by noticing your attachments to comfort. The expectation that your pillow must be exactly positioned, that the room must meet a specific standard. These preferences aren't wrong, but they become limitations when you believe you must have them to rest. Preference becomes craving. Craving becomes frustration. Frustration becomes stimulation, and stimulation is the enemy of sleep. Epictetus would remind us, it's not the thing itself that disturbs us, it's our judgment about the thing. The noise doesn't hold your mind hostage, your resistance to the noise does. The brightness doesn't block your rest, Your story about what that brightness means does. The temperature doesn't trap your comfort. Your labeling of it as wrong does. To undo this, you begin to retrain the mind to meet the environment with neutrality. The sound is not a threat. The warmth is not an attack. These are external events. Their power over you comes only from within. The more often you practice accepting them as they are, the more your body adapts. It stops interpreting them as signals of danger. It relaxes again into the present. This is not something you do once. It's a gradual process of detachment. You sit with the discomfort instead of immediately reacting. You breathe through the irritation instead of feeding it with internal commentary. You become an observer of your reactions instead of their prisoner. And each time you do, your tolerance grows. Your environment begins to feel less personal. The noise is not against you, it simply is. The heat is not an obstacle, it's a condition. You stop turning every minor sensation into a story of unfairness or misfortune. You return your attention to your breath, to the parts of your body that can relax, even if other parts feel slightly off. This split, the choice to focus on ease even while some things feel uncomfortable, is where real peace begins. It's also where your nervous system starts to learn safety. For many people, rest is hard not because of discomfort itself, but because the mind has been trained to see discomfort as dangerous. This leads to hyper-awareness, where small sensations feel big. But when you consistently meet those sensations with calm detachment, you retrain your brain's response. You stop reinforcing the idea that everything must be controlled to feel okay. This is how you reclaim your power, not by making the world silent, but by no longer needing silence to be at peace. Not by controlling every degree of temperature, but by being mentally stable regardless. You practice inner flexibility. You let go of the need for external perfection, and what you get in return is a kind of freedom most people never experience. Environmental indifference is also practical, because when your peace isn't tied to your surroundings, you can rest anywhere. A hotel room, a noisy apartment, a night flight, a guest couch. You don't lose sleep because the circumstances changed. Your practice keeps you rooted. And it's not just about sleep. This detachment sharpens your resilience in daily life. Crowds no longer drain you. Delays don't trigger panic. Discomfort doesn't make you irritable. You become less reactive, more grounded. People sense it. You carry calm with you, not because everything's calm, but because you are. This also reduces dependency on routines. Routines are helpful, but when they become rigid, they create fragility. If you have to take a bath, listen to a certain track, wear certain clothes, and avoid all noise just to sleep, then your peace is too fragile. The Stoics would say that you've become enslaved to ritual. Environmental indifference breaks that chain. It says, I can still rest even when the conditions are not ideal. And when that becomes your standard, anxiety drops, because your brain is no longer anticipating threats from your surroundings. It no longer scans the room for things that are off. It learns to rest even with the imperfections. It trusts that your inner state isn't dependent on outer control. One way to practice this is by purposefully exposing yourself to mild discomfort. Not in a punishing way, but in a way that teaches your nervous system to adapt. Sleep with less covers. Rest with the window open. Let the background noise be there, and instead of reacting, stay with it. Soften your judgment. Let the sound exist. Let the light stay. Notice that you can still breathe, still rest, still be okay. Each time you do this, your threshold expands, your peace grows. Not because the world changed, but because your relationship to it did. That is the essence of Stoic training. Not to fix the world, but to stop letting the world unsettle your mind. You can also create space in your inner dialogue. When a noise bothers you, pause before labeling it. When the temperature feels wrong, pause before complaining. Instead, ask, can I accept this right now? Can I rest with this, not in spite of it? This question is a key. It shifts your energy. It brings you into the moment. And in that moment, something opens. A path to stillness that was hidden by resistance. A path that leads to rest without perfection. Over time, this path becomes easier to find. Your body stops overreacting. Your thoughts stop spiraling. You lie down, and even when the environment is not ideal, your mind is not threatened. It welcomes rest. Not because everything is just right, but because you've stopped needing it to be. That shift changes everything. It turns sleep into a practice of acceptance, a surrender not to conditions, but to the truth that rest comes from within. It comes when you stop controlling, stop clinging, stop judging every sound, every flicker of discomfort as a reason to stay alert. And when you sleep this way, rooted in indifference, not apathy, but freedom, your recovery becomes deeper. Your mind resets. Your body lets go. Not because the world was quiet, but because your mind was. This is what the Stoics trained for. Not a perfect life, but an unshakable self. One that rests when needed. One that adjusts when challenged. One that stays present through every external shift. That's environmental indifference. A mindset that doesn't fight the room, but brings peace into it. A mind that sleeps not only through silence, but through sound. A body that rests not only in cool air, but in all weather. A soul that does not depend on what it cannot control, but instead learns to live and sleep with steady calm wherever it rests. And once you stop letting the outside world dictate your peace, once you stop needing silence, perfect temperature, or stillness around you to rest, you uncover something more personal. You realize that not all disturbance comes from the external. Sometimes what truly keeps you awake isn't the hum of the room or the flicker of light. It's the weight you carry inside, pain from the past, loss you never processed, questions without answers. The kind of hurt that can't be blocked with earplugs or solved by adjusting a blanket. It's the kind of suffering that sinks into your thoughts and stays there, looping, pressing, heavy. This is the kind of discomfort that tests you, not just at night, but in every moment that demands presence while your heart still carries weight. And this is where Stoicism offers something rare. Not just comfort, but transformation. Not escape from suffering, but a method to use it. To turn it from a source of dread into a source of strength. The Stoics taught a radical concept, amor fati, love of fate, not just acceptance, not just tolerance. Love. A full embrace of every single thing that has happened to you and will happen to you, including the pain, including what didn't go as planned, including the moments you begged to avoid. At first, that idea feels too much. How could anyone love the things that hurt them? Why would anyone want to keep the moments that caused suffering? But the answer is found not in the events themselves, but in what they produce in you. Suffering, when faced directly, forges a deeper part of the soul. It removes what's false. It makes clear what matters. It breaks illusions. And, if met with courage, it builds something unshakable. Pain becomes a crucible, a refining fire, not something that defines you, but something that sharpens you. The Stoics didn't look for suffering, but when it came, they didn't shrink from it. They faced it, looked it in the eye, and said, "This too belongs." Not because they enjoyed the feeling, but because they trusted the process. What emerges after struggle is often something stronger, more real, more aligned. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that nothing happens to you, it happens for you, a powerful shift. You move from victim to participant, from passive receiver to active grower. You stop asking why something happened to you and start asking how it can grow from you. That shift doesn't erase the pain, but it gives it shape, purpose, direction. Suffering also humbles the mind. It cuts through ego, reminds you of your limits, and strangely, that reminder brings peace, because it frees you from the exhausting need to appear invincible. You realize that fragility is not failure, it's part of being human. And within that, you gain clarity. Clarity about what you value, about what you can live without, about what your soul actually needs. This process is slow. Some pain doesn't pass quickly. Some wounds heal in quiet layers. But even during that healing, growth happens. You learn endurance, patience, compassion, for others, but also for yourself. The version of you that walks through suffering is not the same as the one who entered it. And if you pay attention, you'll notice a quiet transformation. Your perspective shifts. You stop being surprised by discomfort. You stop asking life to spare you. Instead, you begin to trust that whatever comes, joy or grief, gain or loss, you can carry it. You can shape it. You can use it. That kind of confidence is rare, and it's earned. Not in comfort, but in fire. Suffering also deepens your ability to connect. You begin to see others differently, with less judgment. You recognize pain in their eyes. You understand what it feels like to hold grief in your body while smiling through a day. That recognition builds empathy. You stop needing people to be perfect. You just start needing them to be real. And your own authenticity grows too. You no longer hide behind the illusion that everything is fine. You speak more honestly, you share more openly, and through that, healing spreads. Not just for you, but for those around you who are silently suffering too. Amor Fati teaches you that nothing is wasted, that even the darkest moments carry seeds of insight, that everything that has broken your rhythm, your routine, your expectations, has offered you something that ease never could. A mirror, a challenge, a chance to return to yourself. This doesn't mean you pretend the pain was good. It means you allow it to become good, not in feeling, but in effect. You turn hardship into a reason to become deeper, stronger, more present. You take what once felt unbearable and you carry it with dignity, with patience, with quiet strength. This mindset gives you back your nights, because now when pain arises, you don't run from it. You don't resist or panic. You meet it. You breathe with it. You say, "You are here, and I will not be broken by you." You sit with the ache, not as a victim, but as a witness. And slowly, your nervous system learns safety. Your mind learns acceptance. Your heart learns resilience. This is what it means to let suffering shape you. Not as a scar, but as structure. It becomes part of your foundation. Something you stand on, not something you collapse under. And the more you practice this, the more you see how life has been sculpting you all along, that the hard days didn't ruin you. They revealed you. That the grief didn't erase your joy, it made it deeper. That the fear didn't stop your progress, it taught you to move forward anyway. This is how suffering becomes an asset. When it's integrated. When it's no longer a shadow you avoid, but a source of wisdom you carry. And with that wisdom, you begin to live differently. You love more gently. You speak more carefully. You move through the world with eyes that see more than most. And this too changes your sleep, because now your pain doesn't chase you into the night. It walks beside you. It no longer demands to be silenced. It only asks to be acknowledged. And once you do that, once you say, yes, this hurts, but it belongs, your body relaxes. The war inside ends, and rest becomes possible again. That is the strength Stoicism offers. Not escape, but depth. Not avoidance, but courage. And through that, you become someone new. Someone who doesn't just survive life, but grows from every part of it. Not in spite of suffering, but because of it. And after you've learned to treat suffering as a teacher, after transforming pain into depth, after building resilience not by avoiding hardship, but by embracing it, you realize there's still one subtle attachment left to challenge. One more expectation that quietly dictates how you feel, how you perform, how you treat the day ahead. It's the belief that unless you sleep well, you can't function well, that your mind can only be steady if your body was perfectly rested. And while good sleep is valuable, the Stoics knew that your inner stability cannot be dependent on anything so unpredictable. This is where the idea of the Stoic sleep fast begins. Not a literal fast from sleep, but a mental fast from needing sleep to be perfect. A conscious release of the belief that a poor night of rest justifies a poor quality of mind. The Stoics trained themselves to detach from comfort, and that included detaching from the comfort of sleep itself. Because they understood that comfort can't be the measure of character. Resilience isn't built in ideal conditions. It's tested and proven when your energy is low, when your body feels heavy, and when the day asks more of you than you feel able to give. Epictetus often warned against blaming outer conditions for inner weakness. He taught that fatigue, like all external states, is not inherently good or bad. It simply is. Your response to it is what matters. That means a bad night of sleep doesn't have to become a bad day of thinking. It doesn't have to shape your attitude, your discipline, or your choices. Tiredness is a physical state. How you carry it is a mental one. The practice starts with a shift in expectation. Most people wake up after a short or broken sleep and immediately decide the day is ruined. They anticipate sluggishness, frustration, anxiety. That expectation becomes prophecy. They begin to live out the very tiredness they fear. But the Stoic approach offers another path, to acknowledge the body's limits without surrendering the mind's strength. To say, I feel fatigue, but I remain clear. This is not denial. It's discipline. There are days when you will sleep deeply, and there are days when you won't. Accepting this as part of the natural cycle of life removes the panic that often comes from a sleepless night. Instead of reacting with stress, you respond with calm. You remind yourself, I have been tired before. I have endured worse. Today will not define me. I define how I meet today. This mindset protects your peace. It prevents you from turning a biological fluctuation into a psychological collapse. When you let go of the need for perfect sleep, your nervous system relaxes. You're no longer measuring your energy against an ideal. You begin to focus not on what you've lost, but on what remains, your values, your will. your ability to stay composed. This practice also builds trust. You start to realize that your strength doesn't disappear with a restless night. You can still show up. You can still follow through. The fog may be there, but your direction remains. And every time you carry yourself with grace through low energy, you reinforce an identity not rooted in comfort, but in resilience. Stoics saw sleep not as something to worship, but as something to work with. Marcus Aurelius, despite often feeling unwell and exhausted, reminded himself that his body's fatigue was no reason to abandon his duty. He didn't bully himself into movement. He simply remembered that meaning wasn't tied to ease. And from that clarity, he acted, even when rest had failed him. This kind of thinking frees you from emotional dependency. You stop letting sleep quality decide your mood. You begin each day with a question, not a complaint. The question is simple: what matters today? And how can I give it my best, regardless of how I feel? That commitment becomes your anchor. It allows you to stay rooted even when your body feels untethered. You stop wasting energy resisting your condition, and instead you use what energy you have to serve what you value. This doesn't mean ignoring the need for rest. It means not needing rest to be easy in order to function. This mindset also creates emotional consistency. When you're no longer riding the wave of good or bad sleep, your mood stabilizes. You become less reactive, more grounded. You stop framing your day around how you feel and start framing it around who you want to be. Sleep, like weather, changes, and like the Stoics taught, it is foolish to build your peace on anything that shifts beyond your control. But what doesn't shift is your ability to show up with clarity, even through the fog. What doesn't shift is your willingness to bring your attention to the present moment, no matter how it arrives. The Stoic sleep fast also teaches you how to listen to your body without obeying every complaint. Fatigue might be present, but that doesn't mean your actions must collapse around it. You can rest when rest is needed, but you can also move forward when meaning calls. You learn to discern between real exhaustion and psychological resistance. This balance is key. You begin to respect rest, but you stop worshipping it. You appreciate sleep, but you don't demand it. You use what you're given each night and make the most of it each day. That is strength, not denial, not force, but calm adaptation. You also stop using tiredness as an excuse for unkindness. You stop snapping at others because you didn't sleep well. You stop abandoning your discipline because your body feels off. The Stoic chooses behavior based on principles, not on fluctuating states. And that choice, repeated, creates consistency. It builds trust in yourself, and others begin to trust you more too. This trust is built in small moments. When you take one deep breath instead of complaining, when you stay calm in traffic instead of blaming your bad night, when you speak kindly despite your tension. Each choice, small as it is, becomes proof that you are not your condition. This also shifts how you talk to yourself. You stop saying, "I can't do this today, I'm too tired." You start saying, "I feel tired, but I'll take one step, then another." You stop making fatigue your identity and start making discipline your response. Over time, that builds a kind of confidence that doesn't depend on how well you slept, but on how well you respond. Even your rest improves when your mind stops obsessing over it. When you stop fearing poor sleep, your anxiety fades. The pressure lifts. And ironically, when you stop needing perfect sleep to function, you often start sleeping better, because the body rests more deeply when the mind is calm. This practice is especially important in times of stress, when life demands more and gives less, when circumstances prevent good sleep. During those times, your ability to remain composed becomes more valuable than ever. And it is here, in these moments, that your training shows. You stop being the person who falls apart without comfort. You become the person who adapts, who carries themselves with grace through weariness, who doesn't wait for the perfect morning to bring their full effort. That kind of person sleeps better not because sleep is always available, but because peace is always available. And peace, when practiced regardless of energy, becomes your constant companion. The Stoic sleep fast is not about glorifying burnout. It's about dissolving your emotional dependence on rest quality. It's about removing sleep from the list of things that decide whether you're okay. You take it off its pedestal. You welcome it when it comes, but you no longer chase it like your sanity depends on it. This shift makes room for a more stable life, one where you show up no matter what, one where your sense of self isn't shaken by a poor night, one where rest is a gift, but strength is a decision. And in that decision, you rest more easily, because now you know that even when rest is imperfect, your mind can remain whole, your purpose can remain clear, and your spirit can remain strong. Not because you slept well, but because you know who you are when you don't. And once you've let go of your dependency on perfect sleep, once you've stopped letting your mood rise and fall with how rested you feel, a deeper challenge begins to reveal itself. It's not just about energy. It's not just about physical discomfort. It's about emotion, the quiet undercurrent that runs through every part of your day, the anger that flares when you're interrupted, the sadness that lingers without reason, the jealousy that creeps in when you least expect it, the pride that subtly distorts your actions. Even when your behavior is steady, these forces can stir chaos within. The Stoics called them passions, not just strong feelings, but uncontrolled emotional reactions that disturb judgment and cloud reason. To most people, freedom from passion sounds cold, even robotic. But the Stoic concept of apatheia, a state of being undisturbed by these passions, was never about becoming numb. It was never about disconnecting from life or dulling the senses. It was about achieving a clear, balanced state where emotion serves reason, not the other way around. Apatheia is not the absence of feeling. It is mastery over it. It is the choice to feel fully without being ruled. This distinction matters because many confuse emotional suppression with emotional strength. Stoicism does not ask you to avoid emotion. It asks you to examine it, to understand it, and most importantly, to govern it. The Stoic doesn't feel less. The Stoic feels with clarity. They are not carried by anger, fear, or grief. They walk beside it, with awareness, with control. This practice begins by noticing the difference between a feeling and a passion. A feeling arises naturally. It might be sadness in response to loss, or joy in response to beauty. These are part of life. But a passion, according to the Stoics, is when that emotion becomes a reaction you no longer manage. When anger turns into outbursts, when desire turns into obsession, when fear turns into avoidance. These are the moments where apatheia becomes essential. To move toward apatheia, you start by recognizing how quickly emotions distort perception. A person says something small and you take offense, not because it was harmful, but because you were tired or insecure. A moment of failure feels like proof of your inadequacy, not because it is, but because shame amplifies it. In apatheia, you catch the distortion before it defines your thinking. You don't deny the emotion. you question its authority. This leads to emotional responsibility. You stop blaming circumstances or other people for how you feel. You begin to say, "This anger is mine. This fear belongs to me. I may not have chosen its arrival, but I choose how I respond." This creates space, a gap between stimulus and reaction. In that gap, reason can breathe. The Stoics believed that reason should govern the soul, that we are rational beings by nature, and therefore our emotions should be guided, not abandoned. Apatheia is the result of discipline, not indifference. It comes from examining every emotional impulse and asking, is this helpful? Is this true? Is this aligned with my values? If not, it is let go, not buried, not denied, just released, like smoke from an open window. This practice also makes you emotionally dependable. When others are in crisis, your calm becomes useful. Your ability to feel without panicking, to respond without exploding, creates stability. Apatheia allows you to support others without being swallowed by their pain. You can listen deeply, offer presence, and still return to center. A life led by apatheia is not flat. It is rich, but the richness is subtle. It doesn't spike and crash. It flows. Joy still comes, but it's steady. Sadness still visits, but it doesn't define. Excitement still rises, but it does not unseat reason. Everything is felt. Nothing is clung to. The path to this state requires honest work. You must look closely at your habits. Do you seek validation just to feel safe? Do you avoid discomfort by masking it with distraction or blame? Do you act on emotion before examining it? These are not flaws. They are places for growth. Apatheia isn't perfection. It's commitment to return again and again to balance. One method for this is daily reflection. Each night you review. Where did I let emotion lead today? Where did I act against my better judgment? What would a wise version of me have done? This isn't self-criticism, it's self-alignment. Over time, this practice builds a deeper emotional intelligence, one that doesn't depend on avoiding emotion, but on understanding its roots. You also begin to notice that most emotional chaos comes not from the events of life, but from our interpretation of them. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The act is neutral, but the meaning you assign, "they disrespected me," creates the emotion. In apatheia, you begin to strip events of unnecessary meaning. You start saying, "This happened. Now, what is the best response?" This doesn't make you passive, it makes you strategic. You act based on what supports your principles, not based on what soothes your pride. You choose calm, not because you're afraid to speak, but because you know when silence is strength. Apatheia also creates internal space. Without passions running wild, your mind becomes clearer. Thoughts settle, priorities sharpen. You no longer waste energy chasing emotional highs or running from emotional lows. You begin to live with focus, and that focus becomes freedom. Even in relationships, this practice is powerful. You stop demanding others make you feel a certain way. You no longer give your emotional state to their behavior. You care deeply, but you no longer make your peace their responsibility. This removes pressure from both sides. It allows for real connection, grounded in truth rather than emotional volatility. When practiced consistently, apatheia becomes second nature. You still feel anger, but you respond with justice. You still feel fear, but you move with courage. You still feel sadness, but you act with grace. Emotion becomes part of your humanity, not your master. This leads to a deeper kind of peace, not the fragile peace of a good day, but the durable peace of a steady soul, the kind that can stand in the middle of noise and stay calm, the kind that can grieve without crumbling, the kind that can love without losing itself. This is not a destination, it's a discipline, a lifelong effort to live in harmony with your higher nature, to stop being dragged by your emotions and start being guided by your values. It's not about never feeling, it's about never being ruled. And in that freedom, rest becomes easier. Your mind stops spinning stories driven by passion. You no longer replay the insult. You no longer dwell on the fear. You no longer cling to the hope that someone else will change. You breathe. You release. You return to stillness. That is apatheia, not a void of emotion, but a clear mind, a full heart, and the quiet power to choose your way through anything life brings, with courage, with wisdom, and with peace that does not ask permission. And after practicing apatheia, after learning to hold your emotions without letting them hold you, you find yourself standing in a space few people ever reach, a space that is quiet, honest, and still. But even there, even with emotional mastery, one question still lingers underneath. A quiet tension. The kind that doesn't always speak, but always hums in the background. It shows up when you hesitate, when you hold back, when you fear what others think, what the future holds, what you could lose. It's the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of not achieving enough, the fear of running out of time, of wasting your life. That tension doesn't disappear with discipline alone. It dissolves when you take one more radical step, living as if you were already dead. To most, that phrase sounds dark, but the Stoics didn't see it that way. They saw it as the ultimate release, the clearest lens through which to see life, not as something to dread, but as something to complete. When you live as if you've already died, you strip away everything that doesn't matter. You stop waiting. You stop explaining. You stop performing. What's left is the essential: how you act, what you stand for, how you spend your limited breath. This isn't a morbid exercise, it's clarity. The kind that burns away fear, not by avoidance, but by removal. Because if you've already died, in thought, then what do you still fear? Not failure, not embarrassment, not rejection. You've already faced the final loss. What's left is freedom. When you think this way, judgment stops having power. You don't waste energy trying to impress. You don't change your behavior based on opinions that won't follow you to the grave. You speak more directly. You act more honestly. Because the show ends, and once it does, no one's praise can follow you. No one's ridicule matters. Death wipes the slate, and knowing that now makes your decisions cleaner, sharper, less polluted. This mindset isn't reckless. It's focused. It's not careless, but careful in the right way. Careful with your time. Careful with your attention. Careful with your actions. Because everything you do might be your last. And that's not meant to create panic. It creates presence. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he was dying, not to depress himself, but to focus his will. When he sat at the end of a long day, he didn't ask if it was easy. He asked if it was worthy, if he had acted in line with nature, if he had used his time, if he had spoken truthfully. If today were his last, would he be proud? This thinking reshapes your priorities. You stop chasing things that don't matter. You stop spending hours proving something to people who don't know you. You stop rehearsing every possible outcome before taking action. You realize that hesitation is a thief. It steals your life slowly, one unspoken word, one abandoned effort at a time. And so, you begin to speak sooner. You write the letter. You say what needs to be said. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. Because now you understand, the perfect moment is gone the second you wait for it. All you ever had was now. And now doesn't repeat itself. Living as if already dead also cuts through status. It removes the illusion that titles, money, or popularity will protect you from the end. The grave accepts all the same. So why trade your integrity for something you can't take with you? Why shape your life around being remembered instead of being present? This practice shifts how you measure a day. Instead of asking, was it fun, or did I win, you ask, was I true to what I value? Because when time is short, clarity matters more than comfort. You don't need ease, you need direction. And nothing sharpens direction more than remembering that you don't have forever. It also helps you let go of grudges, of stress, of minor complaints. When you think from the end, you realize how small most things are. The person who interrupted you, they'll be gone too. That embarrassing mistake, forgotten by tomorrow. That bad mood, temporary. The only thing you leave behind is how you lived through it. Whether you met it with grace or resentment, whether you held your values or dropped them. This way of thinking doesn't mean you ignore responsibility. It means you live with urgency. Not panic, purpose. You realize every hour is a decision, not about what to do, but about how to be while doing it. You can wash dishes with presence. You can answer emails with kindness. You can meet strangers with warmth. All of these become your legacy, not one day in the future, but now. Even your suffering takes on new meaning, because when you see life as already ending, pain becomes part of the shape. You no longer ask, why me? You ask, how will I carry this? Not because you enjoy it, but because it's part of your limited script. And how you respond to your pain, that becomes part of the story you leave behind. Fear of loss also shrinks. You begin to understand that you cannot truly lose what was never promised. Every connection, every possession, every breath, none of it was owed to you. So when you live as if already dead, you treat everything as a gift. And gifts are meant to be appreciated, not clung to. Even sleep changes under this perspective, because when you lie down at night, it becomes an act of release. You no longer carry the tension of what wasn't finished. You no longer fear the unknown. You've practiced the art of letting go every day. So when the time comes to close your eyes, it feels natural. It feels aligned. Not because everything is done, but because you used your time with intention. This is not a life of pressure. It's a life of presence, where you don't postpone what matters, where you stop asking permission to be yourself, where you stop building your identity on things that fade, and instead you build it on choice, on clarity, on courage. You walk lighter, you speak braver, you love fuller, not because you know how long you have, but because you've stopped needing to know. You've stopped using time as a reason to wait. You've started using time as the reason to begin. Living as if already dead removes the layers that separate you from truth. It breaks the habits of delay, the fear of looking foolish, the obsession with outcome. You begin to live as if there is nothing left to protect. Because there isn't. Not in the way we think. everything we think we're guarding is already on borrowed time. This mindset also dissolves comparison. What does it matter if someone is ahead of you, richer than you, more recognized? Their finish line is the same. Your value isn't in competing, it's in how deeply you show up, how well you've used your time, how aligned you are with what matters when everything else falls away. The Stoics weren't teaching death worship. They were teaching life ownership. A radical return to the present. A call to cut the noise and pay attention to what's actually in front of you. Because when you start living as if nothing is guaranteed, you start loving without reservation. You start working without needing applause. You start resting without guilt. This clarity also creates forgiveness of yourself, of others. Because when you view life from the end, you realize how much energy you've spent holding on to things that won't matter when you're gone. You stop clinging to being right. You stop waiting for apologies. You begin to choose peace, not as a weakness, but as wisdom. And all of this becomes your sleep. Your mind no longer replays what could have been. It no longer rehearses arguments. It no longer fears tomorrow's weight, because you've practiced the ultimate letting go, not in theory, but in how you live. So when you close your eyes tonight, you do so with calm, because today you lived not waiting, not pretending, but awake, honest. And if this is the end, there is nothing more to chase, nothing left unsaid, nothing to fear, only rest and peace. And after living as if already gone, after removing the fear of loss, the fear of judgment, the fear of time running out, you're left with something even more subtle, something so familiar that it often hides in plain sight. It's the voice inside your head that still wants to be seen a certain way, the one that tries to shape every moment into a performance, the one that wants to be respected, admired, recognized. Even after letting go of external noise, this inner weight remains, not from the world around you, but from the identity you've created to navigate it. This is where the deepest form of detachment begins, the dissolving of ego. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about identity, not in the modern sense of self-branding, but in the ancient sense of the self as a role, a temporary mask. He reminded himself again and again that he was a body destined to die, a mind made of breath, a soul shaped by choice. Everything else, his title, his reputation, even his thoughts, were subject to change, and therefore not truly his. The ego is a construction, built from memory, habit, praise, and comparison. It's not who you are, it's what you've learned to project. It wants to protect your image, it wants to be important. But that need becomes a prison, especially at night. When all the roles fade and you're left alone with your thoughts, it's often the ego that spins the wheel, replaying conversations, rehearsing future arguments, regretting what was said or unsaid, not because those moments matter, but because your identity felt threatened. When you're trying to sleep and your mind won't let go, it's often because some part of your ego was touched that day. Maybe someone ignored you. Maybe you weren't praised for something. Maybe you were misunderstood. These things disturb your rest not because they are painful, but because they contradict the story the ego tells about who you are. The Stoics saw through this. They knew that to be free, you must stop defending your idea of yourself. You must stop clinging to the narrative of "I am this" or "I must be seen as that." They practiced returning to what was unchangeable, their nature as rational beings capable of virtue, no matter what the world thought of them. Marcus reminded himself daily that the opinion of others was not within his control. More than that, he reminded himself that his own status, his role as emperor, was borrowed, not permanent, not defining. His true task was to act justly, speak truthfully, and let go of all need for recognition. That practice releases pressure. It allows the mind to quiet, because now you're no longer trying to prove something every waking hour. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop needing to be seen in a particular way. You begin to act because it is right, not because it will reinforce your image. This shift opens the door to sleep in a powerful way, because once the ego softens, the internal noise fades. There's no more need to keep the day alive in your mind, no need to perfect your past, no need to plan your future to maintain your sense of importance. You can finally let go, fully. When you dissolve the ego, you stop treating every event as a personal attack or reward. The comment wasn't about you. The praise didn't define you. The silence wasn't rejection. It was just life, unfolding according to causes far beyond your control. This realization doesn't numb you, it frees you, because now the weight of self-image doesn't rest on your chest when you lie down, and it changes how you talk to yourself. You no longer scold the self for not meeting a false standard. You speak with more honesty, more gentleness. You stop needing to inflate your worth or hide your flaws. You see that most of the mental spinning is rooted in identity preservation. When you stop needing to preserve an identity, you gain energy. You return to presence. This presence becomes your rest. You no longer lie in bed sorting through the pieces of who you think you should be. You no longer replay the scene where you didn't look strong or smart or impressive. You don't chase validation in your mind. You let yourself be enough without it. Dissolving ego also deepens your relationships. You start listening more because you're no longer waiting to be heard. You give without needing to be thanked. You help without attaching your worth to the outcome. And this way of living carries into the night. You sleep better because your heart is lighter, because your day wasn't spent managing perception. It was spent living with sincerity. This doesn't mean you forget who you are. It means you remember what you are beneath the stories. A human being, like all others, shaped by time, experience, and chance. It means you remember that self-worth is not performance-based, that what matters is not how you are seen, but how you are guided by truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the opinion of others only matters if you've made your peace depend on it. That includes your own opinion of yourself too. If you spend the night evaluating your own worth, your sleep becomes hostage to a false standard. But if you see clearly that identity is fluid, that it's not your soul but your costume, you stop needing to keep it polished all the time. You begin to wake up with less pressure. You no longer need the day to validate your existence. You move through it as a steward of your actions, not as a curator of your reputation. You say what needs to be said. You do what needs to be done. And then you let it go. And at night, that letting go becomes real. You close your eyes not as someone who needs to prove anything, but as someone who already is, who has already been enough, because you aligned with your values, not with your image. This clarity changes your breathing, your posture, your thoughts. You stop reviewing yourself like a performance. You begin to rest, not just the body, but the story. You stop needing to carry it to bed. Dissolving the ego is the deepest silence. It's the space beyond fear, beyond reputation, beyond competition. It's where you return to being, not doing, not becoming, just being. And from there, rest is no longer a battle. It is the natural result of no longer holding the mask, no longer defending the self-image that crumbles under pressure. You release it gently, and what remains is calm. A calm not built on perfection, but on truth. And once you begin dissolving the ego, once you stop needing to replay who you are, what others think, or how you're perceived, you begin to notice just how much mental space that identity used to take up. You feel lighter. But even then, there's something else that tries to pull you back in, not because it's loud, but because it's familiar. It doesn't come from the need to be seen. It comes from the habit of thinking long after the day is done, of turning events over in your head again and again, of reaching for understanding long after it's useful. This is rumination, and left unchecked, it steals sleep, clarity, and peace. The Stoics faced this too. Their minds were active, full of responsibility, reflection, uncertainty. But they didn't let thinking become obsession. They trained their minds to know the difference between useful reflection and mental noise. They practiced not just wisdom in action, but wisdom in rest. That's where the practice of delay and redirection came in. Not suppression, but conscious control. To control the impulse to ruminate, you must first understand what it is. Rumination is not thought. It's a loop. It doesn't solve. It replays. It takes a moment, a sentence, a memory, and spins it until all clarity is gone. You believe you're gaining insight, but often you're just feeding anxiety. The Stoics knew that unchecked thought doesn't bring peace, it brings confusion. So they started with a simple principle: don't engage without reason. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every mental prompt needs to be explored. If something arises that you cannot act on, solve, or clarify, it is not a thought to follow. It is a thought to release. This starts with awareness. You lie in bed and a thought returns, something from the past, a worry about tomorrow. Instead of diving into it, you pause. You ask, is this useful? Can I do something about it right now? If not, you apply delay. You say, I will think about this tomorrow when I can act. For now, it stays where it is. Delay creates space. Space breaks cycles. The Stoics understood that action is tied to time. If you cannot act in the present, then obsessing now is wasted energy. It steals rest without producing wisdom. So they taught the mind to wait, to save analysis for daylight, to allow the night to be what it's meant to be, recovery. Redirection is the next tool. Once you delay a thought, you don't leave a vacuum. You guide your mind elsewhere, not to distraction, but to something stable. Breath, gratitude, observation. You might recall something simple, a moment of calm from earlier, or focus on the feel of your breath moving in and out, not to escape your thoughts, but to anchor your attention. Rumination feeds on drift. Presence ends its fuel. Marcus Aurelius would write that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. That means you choose what colors you allow at night. Rumination often comes from a desire to feel in control, but it backfires. The more you ruminate, the less control you feel. The Stoic approach is to replace control-seeking with clarity-seeking, and clarity rarely comes from spinning. You learn to accept what's unresolved, to sit in uncertainty without needing to analyze it into submission. That acceptance is not weakness, it's recognition that not everything needs to be solved before you sleep, that tomorrow will offer its own space for judgment, that your mind is not meant to run 24 hours a day. This doesn't mean thoughts won't return. They will. But you practice responding instead of reacting. A thought arrives, and instead of feeding it, you notice it, label it, and return to the present. That habit becomes a skill. Over time, your nervous system begins to associate rest with safety, not stimulation. Your brain stops seeing silence as a problem to fill. Even important thoughts can wait. The Stoics didn't fear forgetting, they feared wasting time on the wrong thing. So if something matters, write it down. Remove it from your mind's holding pattern. That small act of release is powerful. It signals closure. You're not suppressing the thought. You're choosing not to carry it. Ruminating also often disguises itself as responsibility. You tell yourself you should be thinking it through, that it shows care, diligence, preparation. But the Stoics would challenge that. Is looping over a mistake the same as learning from it? Is worrying about tomorrow the same as preparing for it? No, they're different, and the difference is intention. Stoic thinking is purposeful. It asks, is this thought aligned with my values? Is it under my control? If not, it doesn't get a seat at the table. You begin to treat your attention as sacred. Not everything gets access. You also learn to work with the body. Because the mind doesn't ruminate in isolation. It rides on tension. A clenched jaw, a shallow breath, a tightened stomach. To break the mental loop, you meet the physical pattern. You breathe slower. You soften the muscles. You release the tension that says, I'm still in the fight. That message calms the brain. This practice becomes your nighttime ritual, not counting thoughts, but clearing space. You give your brain permission to stop performing. You remind it that the day is done, that thinking does not prove your value, that rest does not require every answer. And if thoughts return again and again, you don't fight them, you don't argue. You practice noticing and letting go, like leaves on a stream. You observe, you release, you come back to what's here, not what was, not what might be, just this moment. Over time, this becomes a way of being. You no longer chase every mental thread. You choose which ones to pull. You develop a quiet confidence in your ability to pause, and that pause becomes peace. Even during difficult seasons, when thoughts feel urgent, you stay grounded. You know the difference between analysis and anxiety. You know how to hold space for pain without amplifying it. You know how to give yourself rest without needing to have everything solved. This is what Stoic detachment teaches, that thought is a tool, not a master, that peace comes not from solving more, but from choosing what's worth solving. That rest is not the result of exhaustion, it's the result of surrender. So when your mind begins to spin tonight, pause, breathe, remember, not every thought is worth your energy. Not every worry deserves your midnight attention. You are allowed to release. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to wait for clarity in the light of day. And in that waiting, peace returns, not by chance, but by choice, not by stopping thought, but by guiding it, with patience, with care, and with the kind of strength that doesn't need to control everything, only itself. And after learning to interrupt rumination, after choosing to guide your thoughts instead of being pulled by them, you start to realize what drives much of that internal restlessness in the first place. It isn't always the memory itself or the specific fear. It's the pressure of time, the belief that you are behind, that you need to catch up, that something must happen soon or it's too late. This quiet anxiety runs beneath almost every thought loop, a subtle ticking, a constant reminder that life is moving and you are not moving fast enough. This is the tyranny of time, and unless it is faced directly, it rules the mind and poisons your sleep. The Stoics knew this well. They wrote about death not to be morbid, but to remind themselves how short and unpredictable life is. But they also warned against living in the future, not because planning is wrong, but because obsession with what has not yet arrived robs you of the one thing you ever actually possess, the present. When your mind is tied to future timelines, it becomes tense. It wants to force outcomes. It starts chasing a moving goalpost, and every day feels insufficient. This fear grows quietly. It might appear as pressure to succeed by a certain age, to fix a relationship before it's too late, to achieve something grand so your time here is justified. These thoughts don't feel like choices, they feel like facts. But the Stoics challenge that story. They ask, who defined the timeline you're following? Where did the deadline come from? And what if you stepped off it entirely? Peace begins when you stop measuring yourself against imagined clocks. When you stop believing that life owes you something at a specific pace. Time is not your enemy. Your expectation of how it should unfold is. The Stoics called for presence not because they lacked ambition, but because they knew that the future is never in your hands. Only your attention is. When you try to sleep, but your mind won't stop racing, it's often because it's racing into a tomorrow that hasn't come. What if I don't finish in time? What if they don't change? What if I miss my chance? These questions are built on imagined futures. They're filled with variables you can't touch, and the Stoic response is simple. Focus only on what you can influence right now. That focus is power. It doesn't ignore the future. It simply refuses to live there. You plan for it, yes, but you don't live in it. You don't rehearse every possibility like your life depends on it. You don't tie your peace to events that haven't happened, because peace built on prediction is fragile. The moment the future shifts, your mind collapses. So instead, you root yourself in the now. Not in a vague way, but deliberately. You feel your breath. You check your posture. You notice your senses. And then you choose your thoughts like you would choose words in a letter, carefully, with clarity, without rush. That act grounds you. It removes the need to race time. This practice is subtle. It begins with awareness. You notice when your thoughts slip into the future, not in hope, but in tension. You catch the script that says, if I'm not there yet, I'm failing. And you answer with presence. You say, what can I do with this moment, this breath, this hour? And then you do that, fully. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the present moment is all you can ever lose, that everything else is either memory or imagination. This means that clinging to the future is not just unhelpful, it's self-inflicted loss. You are abandoning what is real in exchange for what is uncertain. And sleep, which requires surrender, becomes impossible when your mind refuses to return home. This is where Stoic detachment from time begins. It doesn't reject movement or goals. It simply detaches your identity from progress. It allows you to act without needing immediate reward, to work without needing a rival, to love without needing a guaranteed tomorrow. That kind of thinking creates space in the mind. You stop hurrying every thought. You stop rushing every conversation. You begin to live more slowly, not in pace, but in presence, and that slowness seeps into your rest. Your brain no longer thinks it has to solve every problem before morning. It trusts the rhythm of action and rest. This detachment also dissolves the fear of wasted time. So much anxiety comes from feeling like you're not doing enough, fast enough. But the Stoics would remind you, Time is not wasted when you are aligned, even if the progress is invisible, even if the change is internal. The question is not, how much did I achieve today? The question is, was I awake while living it? And that is something you can control. Every day, you can choose how you respond, how you speak, how you hold your integrity. These moments are not small, they are your life. The future will become now soon enough. And when it does, your preparation won't come from worry, it will come from attention. This shift also helps you accept your path. You no longer compare timelines. You no longer look at someone else's chapter and feel behind. The Stoics knew that comparison is often just masked impatience. When you stop chasing someone else's tempo, you begin to hear your own. You begin to trust your pace, to accept detours, to learn from delays instead of fighting them. And most importantly, you stop thinking that life begins later. You stop pushing peace to some distant finish line. You start finding it now in the smallest of actions, in how you show up when no one's watching. This doesn't kill ambition, it clarifies it. You start working for meaning, not for timelines. You set goals not to prove yourself, but to refine yourself, to grow without the constant fear of being too late. Because the only thing truly late is the life not lived fully in the moment it was given. This clarity changes how you prepare for sleep. You no longer feel behind when the day ends. You don't judge yourself by a checklist of future milestones. You begin to ask a simpler question. Was I present today? If yes, then the day was enough, even with flaws, even with silence, even with pause. This practice also protects your peace during transition. Whether you're starting something new, ending something old, or simply waiting, you stop needing certainty to feel calm. You stop using time as a weapon against yourself. You use it as a teacher, one that moves whether you chase it or not. And at night, when the lights dim and the mind wants to rush forward again, you pause, you breathe, you say, "There is nothing to catch tonight. There is only now." You release the false urgency. You return to the moment that's still here, the only one that has ever asked for your full attention. And in that attention, rest becomes possible. Not because time is under your control, but because your mind is no longer at war with it. You no longer resist its flow. You no longer fight to be further ahead. You trust that every breath you meet with presence is one step closer to peace. That is what it means to tame the tyranny of time. Not by controlling the future, but by freeing yourself from needing to live in it. Not by doing more, but by being more in what you do. And from that space, sleep comes quietly. Not because everything is done, but because you're finally here. You've now walked through the entire Stoic night, from the cosmic perspective that shrinks fear to the daily self-audits that clear the mind, from the discipline of letting go to the quiet power of accepting death, pain, and even discomfort itself. You've learned how to dissolve cravings, question your identity, redirect overthinking, detach from time, and meet every emotion not with resistance, but with reason. And slowly, layer by layer, what once felt like chaos has become calm. This wasn't just a lesson in sleep, it was a lesson in living, with clarity, courage, and stillness. Because peace isn't found in the perfect night or the perfect life. It's built with each small decision to return to your center. And now, you have the tools, you have the practice, you have the strength. Tonight, when the lights go out, you won't be falling asleep. You'll be letting go with wisdom. Now it's your turn. If one lesson in this journey spoke to you, write it in the comments, not just for you, but for someone else reading who may need the same reminder. Let this space become part of your practice, and if you want to keep growing, reflecting, and finding clarity when the world gets loud, subscribe to the channel. Stoicism isn't a one-time experience. It's a way of showing up every day and every night. Thank you for walking this path. Rest well and live deeply.